The crowd doesn't even see him move. One frame, Gong Seok-jun is 5 feet from his opponent. The next, the poor bastard's eating canvas. Guess that's what 10 years undefeated looks like. Seok-jun stands over the crumpled fighter, breathing steady. His hands are already at his sides. To everyone in the Titan Dome, it looked like a phantom flicker, a glitch in their vision. But the replay screens tell a different story. The slow-motion footage shows the man's guard mysteriously shifting downward. His own arm drops like a puppet with cut strings, and then Seok-jun's fist is already buried in his jaw. The crowd doesn't understand what they're watching. They roar anyway. Seok-jun walks toward the tunnel, ignoring the medics rushing past him. He doesn't need to watch them cart the other guy off. He's seen this ending 97 times before. Baek Si-woo is waiting in the tunnel with a tablet in his hand. The young strategist doesn't bother with congratulations. He's already running the numbers on the next opponent. Si-woo tells him the committee confirmed his entry slot. The Grand Zenith Championship starts in 3 weeks. 32 fighters. Only one walks out with the crown. Seok-jun nods and grabs a towel from the rack. He says the number doesn't matter. His hands flex slightly as he wipes the sweat from his neck. 10 seconds is all he's ever needed. Si-woo taps the tablet and pulls up a flagged piece of footage. He says there's something Seok-jun needs to see. The screen shows a freeze frame of the crowd from tonight's match. Si-woo zooms in on one face in the upper deck, a man in a dark coat, sitting perfectly still. Not cheering, not recording on his phone, just watching. And writing something in a notebook. Seok-jun glances at the image and shrugs. He asks who the creep is. Si-woo's jaw tightens. He swipes to a profile, Jung Do-yoon, known in the underground circuit as the Analyst, a strategist who's coached 5 champions in the last 3 years. He never fights himself. He breaks down other people's techniques until there's nothing left but a formula. And now he's been attending every single one of Seok-jun's matches for the past 2 months. Si-woo says the guy isn't just scouting. He's measuring something. Seok-jun tosses the towel into the bin. He says let him measure. 10-second window in a 5-minute fight is a needle in a hurricane. Nobody's cracking that code. The confidence isn't arrogance. It's math he's done 1,000 times. Si-woo doesn't look convinced. He pulls up another clip from 3 weeks ago. Same guy in the crowd. Same notebook. Different arena. Seok-jun pauses the video himself this time. He stares at the frozen face for a long moment. Then he hands the tablet back. He tells Si-woo that every fighter has tape on them. That's the game. If some pencil pusher wants to waste his nights counting frames, let him knock himself out. Si-woo closes the tablet and falls into step beside him. He says he'll keep an eye on it. Seok-jun pushes through the back door into the cold night air. The parking lot is nearly empty. A few arena staff are loading equipment into a van. Seok-jun's driver is idling near the exit. He climbs into the car without looking back. Si-woo stands alone under the floodlights. He looks down at the tablet one more time. The zoomed-in image of Jung Do-yoon's notebook is grainy, but the page is covered in columns. Every column is a timestamp. Every timestamp lines up with a moment Seok-jun should have been hit. And wasn't. Across town, a light flickers on in a cramped apartment. Jung Do-yoon closes the door and locks it twice. The walls are plastered with fight footage. 6 monitors running on loop. Every screen shows Gong Seok-jun landing a knockout. The man moves with surgical calm. He sits at a desk cluttered with notebooks and pauses one of the feeds. His finger taps the screen at the exact frame where Seok-jun's position shifts. A blink. A single frame of impossible displacement. Jung circles it in red ink. He whispers the number to himself. He's timed it 19 times across 11 different matches. The duration never changes. The window never expands. It's a fixed resource. And fixed resources can be exhausted. Jung opens a fresh notebook and writes a single line at the top. Baited activation in the first 30 seconds. Beneath it, a diagram. A dart. A defensive scramble. A stopwatch. The countermeasure is already taking shape. He leans back in his chair and looks at the ceiling. The smile that spreads across his face is thin and cold. Not the smile of a fan. The smile of a locksmith who's just found the right pick. He writes another line. Once the clock is empty, the ghost is just a man. The pen scratches across the page. Outside the window, the city hums with the excitement of the coming tournament. Posters of Seok-jun plaster every billboard. The undefeated king. The phantom striker. A living legend walking into his 11th year of dominance. Nobody knows what's coming. Jung closes the notebook. On the cover is a name written in block letters. Project Stillness. He kills the lights and sits in the dark. The monitors cycle through their endless loops of Seok-jun's victories. 97 knockouts, 97 moments where time bent around one man. Jung watches them all, and he counts. The next morning, Siwoo is already in the gym when Seok-jun arrives. He's got a whiteboard full of bracket predictions. Kang Min-suk is the first fight. Speedster. After image specialist. Siwoo says the guy's been running his mouth online, calling Seok-jun a relic, saying the streak ends in the first round. Seok-jun starts wrapping his hands. He asks what Kang's weakness is. Siwoo throws up a clip on the big screen. Kang's fast. Stupid fast. His after images leave a half-second trail. A heat shimmer off the real body. Seok-jun watches the footage twice. He says it's enough. Siwoo nods and erases the Kang section from the board. He pulls up the next name. But Seok-jun isn't looking at the whiteboard anymore. He's staring at the gym entrance. A figure is standing in the doorway. Dark coat. Notebook in hand. Jung Do-yoon doesn't enter. He just stands there, watching. Siwoo steps forward, but Seok-jun raises a hand. He tells the young strategist to let it go. The guy wants a preview. Let him take notes. Seok-jun turns his back on the doorway and starts his warm-up. Jung lingers for exactly 47 seconds. Then he's gone. Siwoo exhales. He says that felt like a threat. Seok-jun catches his reflection in the mirror. His expression is unreadable. He says threats are just promises people are too scared to make. A week later, the Titan Dome is packed. 60,000 people screaming. The first round of the Grand Zenith Championship is about to begin. Seok-jun stands in the tunnel, shadowboxing slowly. The noise is a physical weight pressing against the walls. Siwoo is in his ear through the comms. He says Kang is already in the ring. Guys taunting the crowd, playing the heel. Seok-jun cracks his neck. He tells Siwoo to keep the feed clear. He'll handle the rest. The announcer's voice booms through the arena. The undefeated, 11-year reigning champion, the Phantom of the Dome. Seok-jun steps into the light. The roar is deafening. He walks toward the ring without acknowledging the crowd. His eyes are fixed on Kang Min-suk. The speedster is grinning. He's bouncing on his heels like a kid hyped up on sugar. Kang cups his hands and shouts across the ring. He says the ghost is about to get exorcised. Seok-jun doesn't answer. He just climbs through the ropes and rolls his shoulders. The ref calls them to the center. Kang leans in close. He whispers that he's watched every tape. He knows there's a trick. And he's too fast for tricks. The bell rings. Kang explodes forward. 3 after images fan out in different directions. Each one a perfect copy of the speedster mid-strike. The crowd gasps. Seok-jun doesn't flinch. He tracks the shimmer. The faint heat trail Siwoo spotted. It's there, flickering off the real body like a mirage. Kang's fist comes screaming towards Seok-jun's temple. And then the world stops. The crowd freezes. The lights hang motionless. Kang's fist is an inch from Seok-jun's skull. 3 after images suspended in midair like statues. Seok-jun steps sideways. He studies the real Kang's posture, the overcommitment in the shoulder, the exposed ribs. He adjusts the speedster's arm by 2 inches. A tiny shift, nothing visible to the naked eye. Then he positions his own fist at the exact spot Kang's momentum will carry him. Time resumes. Kang's punch sails past Seok-jun's ear, and Seok-jun's counter buries itself in the speedster's ribs. The crack echoes through the arena. Kang hits the mat hard. His after images dissolve. The crowd erupts. Kang coughs and rolls onto his side. He stares up at Seok-jun with wide eyes. He asks, "What the hell just happened?" Seok-jun looks down at him. He says the ghost just exorcised the exorcist. The ref counts. Kang doesn't get up. Fight lasts 9 seconds. Seok-jun walks back to his corner as the crowd loses its collective mind. He doesn't smile. He doesn't celebrate. He just grabs his water bottle and takes a sip. Kang is helped to his feet by his corner team. He's limping, but his eyes never leave Seok-jun. As the speedster is led out of the ring, he passes close to Seok-jun's corner. He stops. He says it low enough that only Seok-jun can hear. That timing wasn't natural. That was something else. Seok-jun meets his gaze. He asks if Kang wants to file a complaint. Kang shakes his head. He says no. He says he's just curious how long Seok-jun thinks he can keep the secret. Then he's gone. Siwoo's voice crackles through the comm. He says that's a problem. Seok-jun wipes his face with a towel. He says it's only a problem if someone figures out the clock, and nobody's that smart. In the upper deck, Jung Do-yoon closes his notebook. He's already written the exact duration. 10 seconds. 1 activation. No second use. He watches Seok-jun leave the ring. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. He murmurs to himself that the clock is the whole game, and he's already figured out how to break it. The Titan Dome's back corridors hum with the low drone of cleanup crews. Seok-jun moves through them like a ghost. His gloves are still taped. Siwoo walks a half step behind, tablet clutched to his chest. He says the analytics are already blowing up. Siwoo adds that people are calling it the fastest first-round finish in Zenith history. Seok-jun doesn't answer. He just rolls his shoulder where Kang's near miss brushed the fabric of his gi. They reach the fighter quarters, a narrow hallway lined with steel doors and flickering fluorescence. Seok-jun's nameplate is already slid into the slot. Champion, Gong Seok-jun, defending. Siwoo pushes the door open. The room is sparse. A cot, a monitor, a rack of towels, and a man already sitting on the cot with an ice pack pressed to his ribs. Kang Min-seok. Siwoo freezes. He demands to know how Kang got in here. Kang lifts a hand in surrender. He says he's not here to fight. He's here because they need to talk. Seok-jun steps inside and lets the door click shut behind him. He leans against the wall. He asks if Kang wants a rematch already. Kang laughs, then winces. He says no. He says that was the cleanest hit he's ever taken. And he's taken a lot of hits. Siwoo positions himself between Kang and the door. His jaw is tight. Kang ignores him completely. He looks straight at Seok-jun. He says everyone in the dome thinks he's just fast. They think it's a technique, a phantom step, a trick of footwork. But Kang says he knows better. He felt the displacement. The air didn't move. For a split second, he wasn't there anymore. And then he was. Seok-jun's expression doesn't shift. He asks what Kang thinks happened. Kang sets the ice pack aside. He says he doesn't need to know the name of it. He just needs to know one thing. Can Seok-jun keep doing it? Or is it finite? Because if it's finite, there's a problem. A big one. Siwoo cuts in. He says this is nonsense. But Seok-jun raises a hand. He tells Siwoo to wait. He asks Kang to keep talking. Kang nods slowly. He says there's a guy. A strategist. The analyst. He's been compiling data on every fighter in the circuit. But for the last 6 months, he's been obsessed with one name. Gong Seok-jun. Kang says Jung Do-yoon approached him 3 weeks ago, offered him a deal. A fat sum to drag the fight past 30 seconds. Doesn't matter how. Just force a delay, bait an activation. Make Seok-jun burn the clock. Siwoo's face goes pale. He asks if Kang took the deal. Kang scoffs. He says he's a showman, not a rat. But the fact that Jung made the offer tells him everything. The guy is building a trap, and he's going to spring it during the tournament. Seok-jun pushes off the wall. He walks over to the tiny sink and splashes water on his face. He asks how Kang knows it's a trap and not just standard scouting. Kang pulls a folded piece of paper from his jacket. He tosses it onto the cot. Seok-jun picks it up. It's a photocopy. Collected timestamps. Frame-by-frame breakdowns from 6 different matches. 3 from 2 years ago, 2 from last season, and 1 from the qualifier last month. Each one marks the exact instant the impossible happens. The gap. The flicker. The stolen frame. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, a single line is underlined. Activation window. 10.0 seconds. No second instance. Exhaustible. Seok-jun stares at the page. Siwoo leans in and his breath catches. He whispers that this is worse than he thought. Jung isn't guessing. He's got hard data. Seok-jun folds the paper and tucks it into his own pocket. He asks why Kang is handing this over. Kang stands, wincing again. He says he hates analysts. Hates guys who sit in dark rooms and pick apart the art of fighting like it's a math problem. He says Seok-jun is the best thing the Dome has seen in a decade. And he doesn't want to watch that get dismantled by some creep with a stopwatch. Kang moves toward the door. Siwoo doesn't block him this time. Before he leaves, Kang turns back. He says Jung is already breaking down the next fight. The grappler, Yoon Ji-tae. He's going to feed Yoon data on how to force Seok-jun into a corner. Make him panic use the pause early. Seok-jun asks if Kang can feed Jung something else instead. Something false. Kang raises an eyebrow. He asks what kind of false. Seok-jun says to tell Jung he's been training his leg speed. Tell him the phantom step relies on a specific muscle group that fatigues. Make him think the clock shortens under pressure. Kang grins. That's nasty. He says he likes it. Siwoo pulls out his tablet and starts typing. He mutters that they'll need a full disinformation script. If they concede bad intel now, Jung's models will break down by the quarterfinals. Kang gives a thumbs up. He says he'll slip the fake report into Jung's data stream within the week. He opens the door. Then he pauses. He reaches into his other pocket and pulls out a cheap burner phone. He tosses it to Seok-jun. He says to use that if Young's people start sniffing around. One contact preloaded. Don't use real names. Seok-jun catches the phone. He asks what Kang gets out of this. Kang's grin fades. He says he gets to see the look on Jung's face when the math doesn't add up. That's worth more than any purse. Then he's gone. The door clicks shut. Silence fills the room. Siwoo exhales like he's been holding it for an hour. He says that was either the smartest play they've made or the dumbest. Seok-jun turns the burner phone over in his hands. He says it doesn't matter. They don't have a choice. If Jung has already got a 10-second model, then they fight in the open or they fight in the dark. And the dark is where Jung lives. So they need light. Siwoo nods. He pulls up a diagram on his tablet. Yoon Ji-tae's fight stats. He's a tank. 6'4", 300 pounds of muscle wrapped in carbon fiber armor. Jung is going to tell him to turtle and absorb hits until Seok-jun overcommits. Force the pause early, then crush him when the clock runs out. Seok-jun studies the screen. He asks what Yoon's weakness is. Siwoo zooms in on the helmet seal. The armor absorbs blunt force everywhere except the neck joint. A quarter-inch gap where the plates meet. If Seok-jun can get inside, he can hit the carotid. But to do that, he needs Yoon off balance. He can't just freeze time and throw a punch. The armor will eat it. He'll have wasted seconds for nothing. Seok-jun's eyes narrow. He says they need to make Yoon trip. Not punch. Trip. Siwoo looks up confused. He asks how you trip a man who's anchored like a boulder. Seok-jun doesn't answer right away. He walks to the window. The city sprawls beyond the dome. 1,000 lights blinking in the haze. He says the arena has obstacles. Rubble columns, cable bundles, water barrels. During the pause, he can reposition them. Create a hazard Yoon won't see until it's too late. If he trips, the armor's weight becomes a liability. Once he's down, the neck is open. Siwoo starts sketching on his tablet. He says they'll need to map the arena layout. Know exactly where every piece of terrain sits. They'll practice the sequence. Every second accounted for. 5 seconds to rearrange. 3 seconds to position. 2 seconds to strike. Seok-jun turns back. He says they'll need a backup plan in case Jung feeds Yoon counter intel. If Yoon knows about the trip hazard, he'll step around it. Siwoo bites his lip. He says, then they make the trip hazard invisible. A wire. A thin steel cable stretched at ankle height. Something Yoon won't notice even if he's looking for traps. They can anchor it during the pause while Yoon is frozen mid-stride. Seok-jun nods. That's the play. Siwoo writes wire on the whiteboard in their planning corner. He circles it twice. He says they'll need to check the league rules for foreign objects. If it's classified as interference, they could get disqualified. Seok-jun says to check but keep it quiet. If Jung's got eyes in the committee, they can't let the wire leak. Siwoo starts digging through the rulebook on his tablet. The room grows quiet, except for the faint tap of his stylus. Seok-jun sits on the cot. He pulls out the folded photocopy Kong gave him. The timestamps. He reads them again. March 14th, 2 years ago. Activation at 0009.87. May 2nd, last season. Activation at 0009.92. Qualifier, last month. Activation at 0009.95. Jung's been tracking him for years, and he's never been wrong. Not once. Siwoo glances over. He says that kind of precision is terrifying. Seok-jun says it's also a weakness, because Jung's whole strategy is built on a number. One number. 10-0. If they can make that number unreliable, Jung's plan collapses. The fake intel about leg fatigue is a start, but they need more. Siwoo suggests he starts a forum thread. Pose as an amateur analyst and plant a theory that Seok-jun's phantom step degrades when he's emotionally stressed. Link it to a fake fight from 3 years ago where he supposedly stumbled after an opponent insulted his dead sister. The emotional angle will make it sticky. Seok-jun's jaw tightens at the mention of his sister, but he doesn't flinch. He says to do it. Use a burner account. Keep the language sloppy so it doesn't look planted. Siwoo nods and starts typing. The hours bleed past. Midnight comes and goes. Siwoo falls asleep on the floor with his tablet still glowing. Seok-jun doesn't sleep. He stares at the ceiling. The ceiling stares back. Somewhere in the city, Jung Do-yoon is doing the same thing. He can feel it, a clockwork mind spinning through every permutation of the next fight. Jung isn't sleeping tonight either. Jung's apartment is dark except for a single desk lamp. The walls are plastered with printouts. Fight footage plays on 3 monitors simultaneously. The same moment from 3 different angles. Seok-jun freezing. Seok-jun moving. Kang hitting the mat. Jung sits in the center. His notebook is open to a fresh page. 10 seconds. 1 activation. No second use. But now he's branching out. He writes new headers. Emotional triggers? Physical fatigue effect. Minimum activation threshold. He's cross-referencing Kang's after-image shimmer data against Seok-jun's heart rate readout from the biometric scanner. A contact inside the medical team slipped him the file. Jung sees a spike just before the pause. Adrenaline. Then a drop. Then another spike as time resumes. He circles the drop. The pause is a calm in the storm. If he can deny Seok-jun that calm, maybe he can shave a second off the clock. Maybe 2. He leans back. His sister's photo sits on the corner of the desk. She's in a wheelchair, smiling. But the smile doesn't reach her eyes. It never has. Jung taps his pen against the photo. He murmurs to himself that this time, the clock won't save the champion. The clock will bury him. He opens a new notebook. The cover reads, Project Stillness, Phase 2. He begins to sketch. A dart, a defensive scramble, a stopwatch, and a single word. Exhaustion. Across town, the burner phone in Seok-jun's pocket vibrates once. A text from an unknown number. Kang here. Jung's offering cash to Yoon's camp. They're biting. ETA on fake intel. 48 hours. Seok-jun reads it. He types a reply. Make it 24. He sets the phone down. The ceiling fan creaks overhead. 3 rounds left before the analyst makes his move, and the secret has never felt heavier. The door to the quarters clicks shut. Kang leans back against the cold metal lock. He says they've got a problem, a bigger one than Seok-jun thinks. Siwoo steps forward, tablet clutched to his chest. His knuckles are white around the edges of the screen. Kang asks if they know how long Jung's been watching. Seok-jun doesn't answer. Kang pulls a folded paper from inside his jacket. He tosses it onto the cot between them. The photocopy is grainy, but the numbers are sharp. Timestamps. Match after match after match. Seok-jun picks it up. His eyes move down the columns. March 14th, 2 years ago. Activation at 9.87 seconds. May 2nd, last season. Activation at 9.92 seconds. The qualifier last month. 9.95. Every single one. Kang says Jung's got footage from 6 different fights. Frame-by-frame breakdowns. He's isolated the exact moment the flicker happens. The analyst knows it's not a technique. Seok-jun looks up from the paper. He asks what Jung thinks it is. Kang shrugs. He says Jung doesn't care what it is. He only cares how long it lasts. And he's already got the answer. 10 seconds. Exactly 10. No second activation in any recorded fight, which means it's exhaustible. Burn it once and it's gone. Kang taps the underlined line at the bottom of the page. The words are written in sharp, clinical handwriting. Activation window. 10.0 seconds. No second instance. Exhaustible. Siwoo leans over Seok-jun's shoulder to read it. His face goes pale. He whispers that this is worse than they thought. Seok-jun folds the paper carefully. He slides it into his pocket. He asks why Kang is showing him this. Kang snorts. He says he doesn't like analysts. Never has. Guys like Jung sit in dark rooms with spreadsheets. They reduce everything to numbers. Fighting isn't math, it's art. And Jung wants to turn the whole tournament into an equation. Kang presses the ice pack harder against his ribs. He winces. He says Jung approached him 3 weeks before their match. Offered him a deal. Full breakdown of Seok-jun's timing patterns. Weak spots. Tells. All of it. Kang turned him down flat. He wanted to win on his own terms, not because some pencil neck fed him the answers. But here's the thing. Jung didn't get mad. He just smiled. Like he expected Kang to say no. It was all part of a bigger game. Kang says that smile is what scared him. Not the data. Not the timestamps. The smile. Siwoo chews on his lower lip. He asks if Jung's already approached Yoon Ji-tae. Kang nods. He says Yoon's camp is hungry. They've been losing sponsors. Their funding is drying up. Jung's offering cash. Real cash. And Yoon's not the type to turn down free money. He'll take the data. He'll build his whole strategy around it. Seok-jun stands up from the cot. He walks to the small window overlooking the arena floor. The cleanup crew is still sweeping the sands. His footprints are probably still there. From 9 seconds of absolute victory, 9 seconds that Jung has already measured and cataloged, he turns back to Kang. He asks what the play is. Kang grins. Now they're talking. He says they feed Jung bad intel. Make him think Seok-jun's got a weakness that doesn't exist, something so specific that Jung builds his whole counter around it. And when Yoon executes that counter in the next round, it fails. Spectacularly. Siwoo's eyes light up. He starts pacing. He says it's classic misdirection. Give the enemy exactly what he wants to find, but the thing he finds is a lie. Seok-jun crosses his arms. He asks what kind of weakness would convince Jung. Kang thinks for a moment. He says it has to be physical, something measurable. Jung trusts data. If they give him numbers, he'll trust the numbers. Siwoo snaps his fingers. He says leg fatigue. They leak a report that Seok-jun's right leg is losing stability. Old injury flaring up. Makes his lateral movement sluggish. If the time stop depends on quick repositioning, a slow leg cuts his effective range. Kang nods slowly. He likes it. But it needs to be more than just a rumor. Jung will verify everything. He's got contacts everywhere. Trainers, medical staff, even people in the committee. Siwoo says then they make it verifiable. He'll start a forum thread. Pose as an amateur analyst who's been tracking Seok-jun's footwork. Post frame grabs showing a slight hitch in his step. Nothing obvious, just enough to start a conversation. Then they wait for Jung's people to find it. Seok-jun taps his finger against the window frame. He says it's not enough. Jung's smart. Too smart to bite on one piece of bait. They need a second layer, something emotional. Kang raises an eyebrow. He asks what Seok-jun has in mind. Seok-jun's jaw tightens. He says they plant a story that stress degrades his timing. Emotional pressure. If an opponent gets in his head, the flicker stutters. Shaves a second off the clock. Maybe more. Siwoo stops pacing. He looks at Seok-jun carefully. He asks if he's sure about this. Seok-jun says they use his sister. Fake a backstory that an opponent once insulted her during a fight. And Seok-jun stumbled, made a mistake he never made before or since. The emotional trigger angle will feel true, even to Jung, because it's the kind of thing that should be true. Kang watches Seok-jun's face. He asks if the sister thing is real. His sister is real. Story is not. And that's what makes it perfect bait. Jung will search for the fight footage. He won't find it, but he'll assume it was scrubbed, hidden, which will make him believe it even more. Siwoo pulls up his tablet. He starts a new document. He says he'll draft the forum post now. Use a burner account. Amateur analysts make grammar mistakes. Real ones anyway. Kang pushes himself off the locker. He winces again. The ribs are worse than he's letting on. He says he'll handle the physical disinformation. He knows a trainer who owes him a favor. The guy can doctor a muscle scan. Show inflammation in the right quadriceps. Nothing dramatic, just enough to look real under a routine medical review. Jung's contact on the medical team will find it within a day. Seok-jun asks how Kang knows about the medical contact. Kang says Jung's not the only one with a network. He's been fighting in this league for 6 years. He knows who talks to who. The medical team has a leak. A junior physio who's been feeding Jung biometrics. Heart rate, muscle oxygen, reaction times. Siwoo looks up from his tablet. He says that's illegal. Kang laughs. He says, "Welcome to the Grand Zenith Championship." Half the fighters are juiced. The other half are cheating in ways the committee can't even measure. Jung just happens to be smarter than all of them, which is why they have to be smarter than Jung. Seok-jun walks back to the cot. He sits down heavily, the weight of the last hour pressing into his shoulders. He says there's one more thing they need. Kang asks what? Seok-jun says they need Jung to think he's winning. If the analyst feels like he's got the upper hand, he'll get sloppy. Confidence is the enemy of precision. They need Jung confident. Siwoo nods. He says they'll let the fake intel dribble out slowly. Not all at once. A forum post here. A doctored medical scan there. A whispered rumor in the training halls. Jung will piece it together himself. And because he found it himself, he'll trust it. That's human nature. Nobody doubts their own detective work. Kang grins. He says he almost feels bad for the analyst. Almost. He limps toward the door. He pauses with his hand on the handle. He says there's one more thing. He reaches into his jacket again. This time he pulls out a cheap burner phone. Black plastic. Prepaid. Untraceable. One contact preloaded. No names, just a number. Kang says to use it only for emergencies. If Jung makes a move they don't see coming. If they need to pivot fast. He says he's not doing this out of friendship. He's doing it because Jung tried to buy him. And nobody buys Kang Min-seok. The door opens. Kang slips out into the corridor. The door clicks shut behind him. The room is silent except for the hum of the overhead lights. Siwoo stares at the phone in Seok-jun's hand. He asks if they can trust him. Seok-jun turns the phone over in his palm. He says they don't have to trust him. They just have to trust that he hates Young more than he hates losing. And for now, that's enough. Siwoo returns to his tablet. His stylus taps rapidly against the screen. He's already drafting the first forum post. The title reads, Seok-jun's Phantom Step. Hidden Weakness? He's using sentence fragments, typing like a kid in a basement. Seok-jun watches him work. The clock on the wall reads midnight. Somewhere across the city, Jung Do-yoon is probably still awake. Still watching footage. Still refining his trap. The photocopy sits heavy in Seok-jun's pocket. 10.0 seconds. 1 activation. No do-overs. He's been fighting with this secret for 10 years. A decade of perfectly timed pauses. And now a man with a notebook and a stopwatch has mapped the whole thing. But Jung only knows the numbers. He doesn't know the fighter. And that's the gap they're going to wedge open. Siwoo finishes the draft. He turns the tablet around for Seok-jun to read. The post is messy, casual, a little too excited. It looks exactly like something a fan would write. He says he'll post it from a public Wi-Fi network tomorrow. Some coffee shop across town. Can't use the dome's IP address. Jung would trace it in an hour. Seok-jun nods. He tells Siwoo to get some sleep. They've got a long day tomorrow. Siwoo curls up on the floor with his jacket as a pillow. He's out in under a minute. Seok-jun doesn't sleep. The same ceiling he's stared at before every fight for 10 years. But tonight it feels different. Tonight there's a clock ticking in his head. 10 seconds. 60 ticks. And a man in a dark apartment who's counting every one. The arena lights drop. Single spotlight finds Yoon Ji-tae in the blue corner. The man is a walking fortress. 6'4", 300 pounds, encased in segmented black armor from neck to ankle. Each plate overlaps the next like the shell of some prehistoric beast. The helmet is a smooth dome with a narrow T-shaped visor. You can't even see his eyes. The crowd roars as he raises one gauntleted fist. Seok-jun stands in the red corner, rolling his shoulders loose. Siwoo's voice crackles in his earpiece one last time. He says the medical scan went live 20 minutes ago. Jung's contact already downloaded it. The leg fatigue story is in play. Seok-jun gives a tiny nod. The announcer's voice booms through the dome. Round 2 of the Grand Zenith Championship. The undefeated Phantom versus the immovable Bastion. 3 minutes. Standard rules. Begin. The bell shrieks. Yoon Ji-tae doesn't charge. He walks. Heavy, deliberate steps that shake the arena floor. Seok-jun circles left. He tests the distance with a quick jab to the chest plate. His knuckles scream. The armor doesn't even dent. Yoon's response is a backhand swipe that moves air like a freight train. Seok-jun ducks under it. The follow-up knee comes faster than anything that size should move. He barely slips it. The knee grazes his ribs. Even through the gi, it feels like getting clipped by a car mirror. Seok-jun backpedals and reassesses. Speed isn't going to win this, not against armor that thick. He needs the pause. But Jung expects the pause. Somewhere in the stands, the analyst is probably counting already, watching for the flicker, waiting for the 10-second clock to start. Yoon closes the gap. Double-leg takedown attempt that should be impossible for a man his size, but he drops his level like a wrestler half his weight. Seok-jun sprawls. Yoon transitions instantly to a body lock. The arms clamp around Seok-jun's torso like industrial machinery. Pressure builds in his ribs. He can feel his own heartbeat in his spine. The crowd senses it. A collective intake of breath. This is how Yoon wins. Crush the mobility. Squeeze until something breaks. Then, toss the remains out of the ring. Seok-jun's vision tightens at the edges. He has maybe 4 seconds of consciousness left. He triggers the pause. The world freezes. Yoon's arms are still locked around him, immovable as concrete. 300 pounds of armored muscle suspended in time. Seok-jun pries himself free. It takes 2 full seconds just to worm out of the grip. He stands in the frozen arena, breathing hard. The silence is absolute. Dust motes hang in the spotlight beams like tiny stars. He walks around Yoon's frozen form. That's when he understands the problem. There is no gap in the armor. Every plate overlaps. Every joint is sealed with flexible mesh. The helmet locks into the neck collar with a mechanism he can't even see. This isn't a fighter wearing armor. This is armor that happens to contain a fighter. Seok-jun circles again. 6 seconds left in the pause. He throws a test punch to the back of Yoon's helmet. His hand throbs. The helmet doesn't care. 5 seconds. Think. He can't punch through. He can't choke what he can't reach. But the arena isn't empty. This is the Grand Zenith Championship. The organizers love spectacle. Around the ring's perimeter, they've set up decorative obstacles, themed hazards for the crowd. For this match, it's industrial wreckage, fake steel beams, loose chains, a rusted engine block on a pedestal. 4 seconds. Seokjun sprints, grabs a length of chain from the nearest display. Heavy, maybe 40 pounds. Links as thick as his thumb. He loops one end around Yoon's left ankle, wraps it twice, pulls it tight. 3 seconds. He drags the other end across the ring to a steel beam bolted to the floor. He secures it with a quick knot. Not pretty, but functional. 2 seconds. He moves back to Yoon. The helmet is still the problem. The locking mechanism sits at the base of the neck collar, a small release catch, nearly invisible under the overlapping plates. He positions his fingers on the catch. 1 second. He squeezes the release. He feels something click. The helmet is no longer locked to the collar. Time slams back. Yoon completes his crushing motion on empty air. His arms close on nothing. The big man stumbles forward, confused. His left leg catches the chain. 300 pounds of momentum meets 40 pounds of steel. The physics are ugly. Yoon crashes face first into the arena floor. The impact shakes the whole ring. Dust billows up in a gray cloud. The helmet, no longer locked, rolls free. It clatters across the floor and drops off the edge of the ring. Yoon pushes himself up to his knees. His face is exposed for the first time in the match. Sweat drips from a square jaw. He blinks in the sudden light. He looks at the chain around his ankle, then at the helmet on the floor 20 feet away. He doesn't understand how either thing happened, but he knows something impossible just occurred. Seokjun doesn't give him time to figure it out. He steps in. Yoon swings blindly, a wild haymaker born of panic, not technique. Seokjun slips inside the arc. His right fist connects with Yoon's unprotected temple. Clean. Precise. The big man's eyes roll back. Yoon Ji-tae topples sideways like a felled tree. He hits the floor on his second bounce. The arena goes dead silent. Then the bell rings. The referee rushes in to check Yoon's condition. He's out cold, breathing, but gone. Seokjun stands in his corner, shaking out his hand. His knuckles are already swelling. But his secret is intact. Use the chain, the beam, the release catch, all during the pause. To any observer, it just looked like Yoon tripped. A freak accident. Jung Do-yoon is definitely watching. And Jung just saw the leg fatigue story confirm itself in real time. Because Seokjun deliberately stumbled during his circle, a tiny hitch in his right leg. Barely perceptible, but Jung's cameras catch everything. The medical team wheels Yoon out on a stretcher. He regains consciousness halfway to the exit. His voice carries across the quieting arena. He's asking what happened. Nobody has a good answer for him. The announcer declares Seokjun the winner. The crowd's reaction is strange. Applause, yes, but threaded through with something else. Confusion. Suspicion. A low murmur that ripples through the stands. 2 rounds now. 2 opponents who should have won on paper. 2 inexplicable moments where reality seemed to hiccup. Seokjun raises his fist to the crowd. The gesture is automatic. 10 years of muscle memory. But tonight, it feels like holding up a mask and daring them to look behind it. Siwoo meets him in the tunnel. His face is pale. He says the forum post already has 300 comments. The leg fatigue theory is spreading through the fan boards. A few people are even posting frame-by-frame breakdowns of the stumble. They're doing Young's work for him. Seokjun asks about the medical scan. Siwoo says Kang delivered. The junior physio pulled the file 40 minutes before the match. Right quadriceps inflammation. Grade 1 strain. Recovery time 3 to 5 days. Young definitely has it by now. They walk in silence toward the medical bay. Seokjun needs ice for his hand. Maybe an x-ray. As they turn a corner, a figure steps out of the shadows. Kang Min-seok. Still moving stiffly, still holding his ribs like they might fall out, but grinning. Kang says he watched the fight from the fighter's gallery. Says the chain was a nice touch. He asks if Seokjun got the helmet catch in 1 try or 2. Seokjun holds up 1 finger. Kang whistles low. He says Young is going to lose his mind trying to model that. A tripped ankle, a loose helmet, a lucky punch. None of it shows up on a stopwatch. They reach the medical bay. Kang stops at the door. He says he's got one more piece of news. His contact on Yoon's team just confirmed something. Jung paid Yoon $30,000 for Seokjun's biometric data. Cash. Half up front, half after the fight. But Yoon lost. So Young just wasted 15 grand and got a face full of disinformation instead. Seokjun almost smiles. The analyst is bleeding money and data points. And he doesn't even know which data points are real. Kang turns to leave. He pauses. Not good news. The tournament committee is noticing a pattern. 2 rounds, 2 weird wins. They're not suspicious yet, but they're curious. And curious people ask questions. He limps away before Seokjun can respond. Siwoo pushes open the medical bay door. Inside, the room is empty, except for a single doctor and an ice machine. Seokjun sits on the exam table. He lets the doctor examine his hand. The knuckles are bruised, but not broken. Siwoo scrolls through his tablet. His face tightens. He turns the screen towards Seokjun. It's a private message board. Invite only. Fight analysts with verified credentials. A new thread just went live 3 minutes ago. The title reads, Phantom Step, Quantifying the Anomaly. The author's handle is a string of numbers, but Seokjun knows who it is. Jung Do-yoon just went public. Not with the truth, with a question. He's baiting the analytical community, turning them into a distributed research network. Anyone who figures out the time stop gets an invitation to collaborate. Seokjun stares at the screen. The analyst isn't just tracking him anymore. He's building an army. The 3rd round of the Grand Zenith Championship arrived faster than anyone expected. 2 days after Yoon Ji-tae woke up asking what truck hit him, the Titan Dome's maintenance crew spent 6 hours prepping the ring. Special thermal coating on every surface. Rumor had it, the next opponent could freeze a man solid or roast him alive. Same fighter. Han Na-ri, the Frostfire Witch. 12 professional wins, 0 losses, and a reputation for ending fights in under a minute. Not by knockout, by surrender. Opponents walked into her ice maze and never found the exit. The promo screens in the concourse showed her highlight reel. Flame vortex swallowing a heavyweight. Ice spears pinning a speedster to the wall. Girl was a walking natural disaster. Siwoo paced the tunnel with his tablet clutched like a holy text. The leg fatigue thread had hit 20,000 views. Jung's analyst recruitment post sat at 1,200 comments. The crowd smelled blood in the water. But they had no idea whose blood. Gong Seokjun rolled his shoulders in the red corner. His bruised knuckles were taped tight. The doctor cleared him this morning. No fracture, just ugly. Good enough. The announcer's voice dropped from the overhead speakers like a hammer. Round 3. The undefeated Phantom versus the Frostfire Witch. The crowd erupted. Han Na-ri stepped into the blue corner. She was lean, late 20s. Silver-streaked hair buzzed short on the sides. Her gear was minimalist. Reinforced vest, combat trousers, gloves threaded with conductive filaments. No helmet, no armor. She didn't need it. Her element was distance. The bell rang. Seokjun shot forward with a standard probing jab. Not to land, to test. Han Na-ri didn't dodge. She slammed one palm flat against the mat. A wall of ice erupted between them. 8 feet high, 3 inches thick, opaque like frozen milk. Seokjun checked his momentum and pivoted left. She slammed her other palm down. A second ice wall shot up behind him. Then a third to his right. 3 walls in under 2 seconds. The crowd howled at the speed. Seokjun was already boxed. He backpedaled toward the only open side. Han Na-ri snapped her fingers. A curtain of flame roared across that gap. Orange and white, 10 feet high, heat that hit the front row. The cage was complete. Ice on 3 sides, fire on the 4th. Seokjun stood in the center, sweat beading instantly. His hair curled from the heat. Smoke stung his eyes. Siwoo's knuckles went white on the tablet. Han Na-ri smiled behind the flame curtain. She thought this was over. She thought wrong. Because Seokjun found that calm. The calm before the flicker. And the world froze. Every flame became a sculpture of orange glass. Every ice wall a silent glacier. Han Na-ri's expression locked mid-smirk, one hand already rising for her next spell. Seokjun had 10 seconds. He didn't waste a single one. First, the fire curtain. He stepped straight through the frozen flames. No heat, no resistance. Like walking through a paused video of a bonfire. On the other side, Han Na-ri stood behind a low ice barricade she'd raised for cover. She'd been waiting for him to try breaking through. Not anymore. Seokjun turned to the ice wall behind him. He grabbed a block the size of a small television, weightless in the pause. He carried it to the center of the ring. Then another block. Then a third. He stacked them in a jagged line right where the fire curtain used to be. A wall of solid ice now facing Han Na-ri. When time resumed, her line of sight would hit nothing but white. Total blind spot. 5 seconds left. He spotted the platform she'd created earlier, a low sled of ice meant to give her elevation for spellcasting. He dragged it across the ring. positioned it right behind the new block wall, then climbed aboard. 4 seconds. He crouched, one hand touching the ice for balance. His heart hammered, but his mind stayed cold. 3 seconds. He checked his angle. Perfect. She'd be staring at a wall, confused. He'd be closing distance on a frozen chariot. 2 seconds. Time snapped back. The flames behind him roared to life with a concussive whump. Han Na-ri blinked. She expected to see Seok-jun still pinned in her cage. Instead, a fresh wall of ice blocks blocked her entire view. Confusion cracked her focus. She couldn't see him. Couldn't target him. Her hands came up, spells half-formed, no target to lock. And in that heartbeat of hesitation, the ice sled shot forward. Seok-jun rode it like a street kid on a stolen skateboard, straight through the gap between the block wall and the ring edge. He was a blur of motion. Han Na-ri sensed movement at the edge of her peripheral vision. She spun. Too slow. Seok-jun leaped off the sled. His left arm swatted a desperate ice shard she flung. His right fist drove into her solar plexus. Clean. Precise. Not a knockout blow. A punctuation mark. The air left her lungs in a sharp gasp. She folded at the waist and hit the mat on both knees. The ice walls around the ring shattered instantly. Not dramatic, just her control collapsing. Water and steam flooded the arena floor. The crowd went dead silent. Seok-jun stood over her, fist still cocked. He didn't swing again. Didn't need to. Han Na-ri looked up. Her eyes were wide. Not with fear. With pure professional curiosity. She raised one hand, palm out. Concession. The referee scrambled in, waving his arms. She pushed herself up, wobbling, one hand pressed to her stomach. Then she spoke. Her voice was hoarse, but carried through the quiet arena. She said his timing was strange. Strange in a way she couldn't explain. Like he knew exactly where she'd be before she got there. Not unnatural, just ahead. A compliment wrapped in a question. Seok-jun met her gaze. He didn't answer. He just nodded. A small, respectful dip of the chin. Han Na-ri tilted her head. She was filing this away. The announcer's voice cracked through the speakers. Winner by concession, the undefeated Gong Seok-jun. Applause came, but it was that same weird mix. Cheers threaded with murmurs. 3 rounds now. 3 opponents who should have won on paper. 3 moments where reality seemed to glitch. The Phantom's luck was holding, but the crowd was starting to do the math. In the stands, Jung Do-yoon didn't clap. He was staring at his tablet, replaying the footage frame by frame. The flicker appeared and vanished. But something new caught his eye. Han Na-ri's ice block wall. In the footage, one frame it was beside her, a defensive barricade. Next frame it was 10 feet forward, completely repositioned. While Seok-jun was supposedly trapped in a burning cage, Jung's stylus hovered. He scribbled a note in the margin of his digital sheet. Environmental manipulation confirmed. Range extension during anomaly. The leg fatigue narrative made no sense here. A dead-legged fighter doesn't rearrange ice blocks, doesn't ride a frozen sled across the ring, doesn't land a perfect strike while his opponent's still processing. Jung's expression stayed flat, but his jaw tightened. The fake intel was working, and he didn't know it yet. He typed a single line into the private analyst thread. Round 3. Environmental manipulation observed. Refined Phase 2 model. Meeting in 1 hour. His army of data nerds would tear this fight apart pixel by pixel. They'd find the shape of the secret eventually. Not tonight. Tonight, the disinformation kept its teeth. In the tunnel, Siwoo met Seok-jun with a towel and a water bottle. His face was pale, but his eyes were burning. He said the leg fatigue thread is holding. People are calling the ice sled a desperation move from a fighter protecting his bad leg. Genius spin. Seok-jun wiped his face and asked about the medical scan. Siwoo said Kong's contact confirmed Jung downloaded it 30 minutes before the fight. The junior physio delivered right on schedule. Jung's Phase 2 model is now built on a fake injury and a false emotional trigger. Seok-jun almost smiled. Almost. He asked about the committee. Siwoo's expression darkened. He said they're not suspicious yet, but they're not blind either. 3 weird wins in a row. A fighter who keeps surviving impossible setups. Curious people ask questions, and questions are the last thing this secret can afford. The tunnel's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Siwoo handed him a towel, and that look he always got after a close call. Seok-jun wiped his face and said he needed air. The kid opened his mouth to argue. Seok-jun cut him off with a hand. He wasn't asking. The champion walked past the medical bay and out a rear exit. Nobody stopped him. The air outside the Titan Dome tasted like diesel and cheap fried food. He took a left down an alley and kept walking. The city's neon hummed through the concrete. He didn't hail a cab. He had a place to visit. 10 minutes later, he stood at the iron gates of Hanul Memorial Park. The place was dead quiet. Rows of white stone stretched into the darkness like a frozen army. He knew the path by heart. Grave number 312, section 7, just under a cherry tree. The tree was bare now. Winter hadn't loosened its grip. He knelt in front of the headstone. Gong So-yeon, beloved sister, brought light to everyone she touched. Died at 22, 10 years ago tonight. He traced her name with a fingertip. The stone was cold enough to burn. He closed his eyes, and the memory swallowed him whole. The night of the crash, the sky was weeping. Seok-jun was 18 and stupid with a fresh driver's license. So-yeon rode shotgun, singing off-key to a bubblegum pop track on the radio. She'd insisted on driving the old sedan because their mom's cooking had put him in a food coma. She joked he'd steer them into a ditch if he nodded off. He'd laughed. 20 minutes later, a drunk truck driver blew a red light at the intersection of Highway 7 and Mill Road. Seok-jun saw the headlights first. Too bright, too fast, too late. He froze. His sister didn't. In the half-second before impact, she unbuckled her seatbelt, threw her body across the console, and shoved him hard through the passenger door. The door wasn't fully latched. It flew open. He tumbled into the rain. And then the world stopped. Literally, the headlights froze mid-beam like white paint smeared across wet asphalt. The truck's grille hung inches from the sedan's crumpled nose. Shattered glass sparkled in the air like suspended diamonds. His sister's hand was still extended, fingers reaching for him. Her eyes were wide, but her expression was calm, like she already knew. He hung there, 8 feet from the ground, every muscle locked. 10 seconds. He counted them because some primal circuit in his brain just knew. This was his window, his miracle, his curse. The clock hit 0, and reality slammed back. He hit the ditch hard and rolled. The sickening crunch of metal folding echoed behind him. Then the sedan's gas tank ignited. The explosion lit up the rain like a second sunrise. He scrambled up the embankment, screaming her name. The fire was already too hot to approach. He collapsed on his knees and watched his sister burn. That was the last thing he remembered before the blackness took him. He woke 3 days later in a sterile white room with a tube down his throat. Broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and a concussion that made the lights feel like knives. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive. He didn't feel lucky. He felt hollow. The nurses came and went, their faces a blur of pity. On the 4th day, they removed the breathing tube. He asked about So-yeon. The silence that followed told him everything. That night, he stared at the ceiling and wished he'd died in her place. And then he got curious. He focused on a pen on his bedside table. The same stillness he'd felt in the crash crept into his chest. He willed the world to pause. It obeyed. The pen hung midair. 9 seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. He let it drop before the clock ran out. The cheap plastic clattered on the linoleum. No alarms, no visible change. Just a man in a hospital bed and a secret no one would believe. He tested it again in the dead of night with a plastic cup, a tissue box, a stray sock. Every time the same result. 10 seconds of frozen reality, then the world resumed. No cooldown, no visible side effects. Just 1 use per anything he counted as a fun. The rules seemed arbitrary, but they were his now. He never told anyone how he got it. Didn't need to. He knew it was a gift from her. From that last shove, from the fire, from the silence where a sister used to be. Some cosmic exchange, a life for a power. Not fair, but real. He sat up in that hospital bed and made a promise. He'd never lose a fight. Not once. Not ever. Every punch he threw would be for her. Every opponent who hit the mat would be a message. I'm still here, Nuna. I'm still standing. He checked himself out of the hospital 3 weeks later. The physios gave him a list of exercises and a lecture about taking it slow. He nodded politely and walked straight into a local underground fighting pit. His first match was against a washed-up heavyweight named Daeho, who'd broken more jaws than he'd read books. Seok-jun froze the clock at the opening bell, walked up to the guy, adjusted his guard, and drove a right cross into his temple the instant time snapped back. Daeho dropped like a sack of cement. The crowd went ballistic. Seok-jun just stood in the center of the ring and stared at his knuckles. They didn't even hurt. That night, he visited the grave for the first time. The cherry tree was in full bloom. Petals fell like pink snow. He knelt in the grass and told her he'd won. Told her he'd keep winning. Told her she'd never be forgotten. He came back every year on the anniversary, sometimes more often. The visits grounded him, reminded him why he stepped into the ring. Now, a decade later, he pressed his forehead to the cold stone again. The wind stirred the bare branches overhead. He spoke to her in a low murmur. He told her about the tournament. 3 rounds down, 3 weird wins, and a whole lot of people starting to sniff around. He told her the analyst Jung Do-yoon was building a model to break him. The guy had data, minions, and a grudge that ran deep. He said none of that mattered, because the promise he'd made right here, the night of his first victory, still held. He wasn't going to lose, not to a speedster with after-images, not to a walking fortress in black armor, not to a witch who played with fire and ice, and definitely not to some desk jockey with a stopwatch and a vendetta. The stone remained silent. But he felt her listening. He always did. Behind him, footsteps crunched on gravel. He didn't turn around. Siwoo's voice came from a few paces back. The kid asked if this was where he always disappeared to. Seok-jun said now he knew. Siwoo walked up and stood beside the grave, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. He asked her name. Seok-jun told him. So-yeon. Siwoo nodded and stayed quiet. The kid didn't need an explanation. A prodigy strategist could connect the dots. He saw the years of solitude in Seok-jun's eyes. Saw the weight he carried under every punch. Saw why the undefeated Phantom never celebrated a victory. Saw why he just walked out of the ring and found the nearest exit. It all clicked. The silence stretched. Siwoo eventually spoke up again. He said the committee was sniffing around about the last 3 fights. The medical scan had bought them time, but not much. He said Young's analyst goons were posting frame-by-frame breakdowns of the Han-Na rematch on the forum. The disinformation was holding, but threads were starting to unravel. Some armchair expert had pointed out the ice sled wasn't a desperation move. It was a planned repositioning. People were asking uncomfortable questions. Seok-jun stood up. His joints popped. The cold had seeped into his knees. He asked if Kong's contact had delivered any new intel. Siwoo shook his head. Just radio silence since the fake leg scan went through. He said the burner phone hadn't buzzed either. Seok-jun stared at the headstone for another long moment. Then he clapped Siwoo on the shoulder. He told him to stop worrying. He'd been fighting for 10 years. 314 wins, not a single loss. And he didn't plan to start now, not while she was watching. He tilted his chin toward the sky. Siwoo followed his gaze. The kid didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The two of them stood there in the graveyard, the cold wind whipping at their jackets. A pair of mismatched warriors bound by secrets and a shared war against a man with too many spreadsheets. It was almost funny. Seok-jun didn't laugh, but a corner of his mouth twitched. He started walking back toward the gate. Siwoo fell into step beside him. The kid said Ma Jin-hyuk was next, the brawler with the instincts that couldn't be faked, the one who'd make the time stop look like a liability. Seok-jun said bring it. He'd faced worse odds in a hospital bed with a tube in his chest. The city lights flickered in the distance like embers as they left the cemetery. Behind them, the cherry tree stood guard over a promise carved in stone. The quarterfinals were in 2 days. Another puzzle, another test. But Seok-jun walked away from that grave with fire in his chest, and a vow he'd never break. The leg fatigue story was holding. The fake emotional trigger was planted. And Jung Do-yoon was out there somewhere, staring at a false model, convinced he had the Phantom figured out. The irony was thick enough to cut with a chain. He didn't know the real trigger was buried under a cherry tree in Section 7. He never would. Siwoo glanced at Seok-jun as they reached the main road. The kid asked if he was ready for Jin-hyuk. Seok-jun didn't answer. He just kept walking, but his fists were already clenched. The night swallowed them whole. And somewhere behind the clouds, a star that wasn't really a star flickered once and went out. The Titan Dome crackled with the roar of 40,000. 2 days had passed since the graveyard. The quarterfinals were here, and Ma Jin-hyuk was already in the red corner, a slab of muscle with a shaved head and no stance. His arms hung loose. His feet shuffled in no particular rhythm. The guy looked half asleep. But everyone in the arena knew the truth. Jin-hyuk's body moved before his brain gave the order. Pure instinct. A fighter's nightmare. Seok-jun stepped into the blue corner with his fists taped. His expression was unreadable. Siwoo had warned him from the prep room. The kid's exact words were to not try the usual trick. Seok-jun had only nodded. Now the bell split the air. Jin-hyuk shambled forward like a man looking for a dropped coin. No guard. No telegraph. Just a heavy forward pressure. Seok-jun circled. He flicked a jab to test the distance. Jin-hyuk's head tilted a fraction slower than breath. The punch passed through empty space. Seok-jun reset and fired a tight cross. Same result. The big man's shoulders rolled with a weird liquid delay. Every shot grazed hair or air. The crowd started to murmur. The undefeated Phantom couldn't land a clean touch. Seok-jun stepped back and sharpened his focus. He'd faced speedsters and element wielders. But this was something else. He decided to force the issue. He threw a three-punch combo with his signature flicker timing. His fist accelerated into the zone where opponents always froze. Jin-hyuk's body rippled sideways. Not fast, just preloaded. His torso drifted out of the strike path the instant before impact. Seok-jun's knuckles kissed humid air. The instinct was reading the intent, not the movement. Jin-hyuk's lazy eyes blinked. He asked if that was supposed to be the phantom step. Seok-jun didn't answer. He regained his footing and tried a different angle. A faint low, then a high kick. Jin-hyuk's lead hand never rose, but his skull dipped under the shin as if pulled by a string. The crowd howled in disbelief. This was the guy who'd dismantled a fortress in black armor. This was the man who'd frozen fire. And yet a brawler with no formal stance was reading him like a children's book. Seok-jun's jaw tightened. He understood now. The time stop wouldn't matter if the body already moved. Conscious thought was a laggy middleman. Jin-hyuk's wiring bypassed all of it. Seok-jun could freeze the world and place a fist on the man's chin. But the instant time snapped back, those nerves would fire. The dodge would happen anyway. The pause would be a wasted resource. He backed up until his shoulders brushed the ropes. Jin-hyuk ambled after him, the brawler's hands still dangled like afterthoughts. Seok-jun's mind raced. The one-use limit meant he couldn't afford to test the theory with a throwaway activation. He needed a plan that made the instinct work against itself. Siwoo's voice echoed from 2 days prior. The kid had said Jin-hyuk's body learned patterns faster than a neural network. It built a predictive model after 2 or 3 exchanges. It never forgot a sequence. The weakness was predictability. The instinct couldn't tell the difference between a real pattern and a constructed one. If Seok-jun fed it a false rhythm, the body would overcommit. It would pre-act a whole chain of movement. And if the final link of that chain suddenly changed, the trap would snap shut. Seok-jun's eyes flicked to the ring's architecture. The quarterfinal stage had a shorter apron. The walls were reinforced steel panels, not ropes. A hard surface designed for no escape. That would do. He exhaled and stepped forward. Time to feed the beast. He threw a slow left jab, then another. Same speed, same angle. Jin-hyuk's shoulder twitched. The body was logging the data. Seok-jun fired a third jab at identical tempo. Now the dodge was smoother, ahead of the punch by a heartbeat. The brawler's mouth curled into a faint smirk. He thought the phantom was predictable. Seok-jun switched cadence. A sudden right cross at twice the speed. Jin-hyuk's spine coiled and released. His entire torso bent backward, as if hinged at the hips. The fist sailed past his nose, but the body had committed hard. Seok-jun saw the overextension. The instinct was greedy. It consumed patterns with no filter. He circled again and began a new sequence. 2 jabs, a low kick, then a left hook. Slow, deliberate. Every strike telegraphed like a training drill. Jin-hyuk's body flowed around each one with an oily precision. The crowd grew restless. They didn't understand what they were watching. The phantom looked clumsy, sluggish. Some fans began to boo. Siwoo in the stands had gone pale, but the kid's fingers were drumming on his tablet. He was connecting the dots. Seok-jun repeated the same 4-strike combo a second time. Jin-hyuk's evasions grew even faster. His body was now reacting before the motion finished. Perfect. The brawler's head swayed left, then right. Then his leg lifted to check the low kick before it launched. The instinct had fully internalized the pattern. Now came the moment. Seok-jun stepped into the same footwork, same shoulder tilt, same eye line. He threw the first jab. Jin-hyuk's head slipped. The second jab, the big man's torso rolled. The low kick started. This time, Seok-jun planted his foot and froze. He reached for the calm at the center of the storm. The world bled into silence. The crowd vanished. Jin-hyuk's body became a statue half-twisted in mid-dodge. Seok-jun had 10 seconds. He walked around the frozen brawler. The instinct had already committed to the pattern. The body was locked in the first 3 beats of the evasive chain. It would finish the 4th automatically the moment time resumed. Seok-jun changed the script. He placed his right palm near Jin Hyuk's temple. Not a strike, a marker. The original pattern called for a left hook at this exact spot. The brawler's instinct expected that curve. Seok-jun repositioned his body completely. He moved to a 45-degree angle on Jin Hyuk's blind side. He loaded a short uppercut, a strike that would arrive from below, not from the side. The instinct's pre-programmed dodge would send Jin Hyuk's head directly into the steel wall panel. The trajectory was set. The body would flee the phantom hook that never came, and the wall would do the rest. Seok-jun glanced at the wall, a solid slab of reinforced alloy, 1 yard behind the brawler's current position. He had 4 seconds left. He scanned for any variables. Jin Hyuk's feet were planted wide. His center of gravity was low. The dodge would be a lateral burst, straight into the panel. Seok-jun shifted his weight onto his back foot. He coiled the uppercut. 2 seconds. He inhaled. Time crashed back like a tidal wave. Jin Hyuk's body completed the evasive chain in a blur. His head snapped to the right, avoiding the phantom left hook. Except the hook wasn't there. His temple drove straight into the steel wall with a sickening crack. The entire ring shuddered. Jin Hyuk rebounded off the panel. His eyes rolled white. His legs tangled beneath him. He hit the canvas face first. Blood trickled from a gash above his ear. The crowd went dead silent for a full second. Then they erupted. The referee rushed in. He checked the brawler's pupils. Jin Hyuk was out cold before he hit the floor. His body had defeated itself. The instinct had been weaponized against its owner. Seok-jun lowered his fists. He hadn't even thrown the uppercut. The threat of the punch had been enough to trigger the fatal dodge. The referee waved his arms. Technical knockout. 3 minutes and 41 seconds into the first round. The announcer screamed the undefeated phantom's name. Seok-jun stared down at the fallen brawler. No triumph flickered in his eyes, just a quiet, cold respect. Ma Jin-hyuk had been the most dangerous opponent yet. Not because of his power, but because he exposed the flaw at the heart of the time stop. Against a true instinct fighter, the pause was useless. If Jung Do-yoon had been watching, he'd have learned something new. Seok-jun glanced at the stands. The analyst's usual seat was empty. A single camera drone hovered near the rafters. Its lens was trained directly on the ring. Jung was watching from somewhere else, and he was definitely taking notes. The corridor outside the ring was a concrete throat. Sweat and chalk dust hung in the air. Seok-jun walked with his hands still wrapped. The tape was frayed at the knuckles. Siwoo flanked him, tablet clutched to his chest like a shield. The kid's face was pale, but his eyes were burning. He was already crunching the numbers on the Jin Hyuk fight. But the numbers weren't the problem right now. 3 figures stood at the end of the hall. Daeho leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. The washed-up heavyweight had a smirk that stank of cheap soju. Behind him, 2 younger fighters blocked the path to the locker room. One had a scar splitting his left eyebrow. The other was built like a refrigerator with legs. Daeho pushed off the wall. He clapped slowly. The sound echoed off the bare concrete. 3 slow claps, sarcastic and wet. He told the phantom that was quite a show out there. His voice was greasy with false admiration. The big guy wanted to know what kind of trick makes a man knock himself out. Siwoo stepped forward, but Seok-jun's arm stopped him. The scarred fighter snickered. He said 3 weird wins in a row was a hell of a coincidence. Daeho tilted his head. He wasn't accusing anyone of cheating, of course. He just wondered what the committee would think about all these freak accidents. Seok-jun's face was stone. He asked if Daeho had a point or just a big mouth. The refrigerator laughed. Daeho's smirk tightened at the corners. He said the point was simple. Fighters talk. Everybody saw the Yoon match. A 300-pound tank trips over his own feet, and the Frostfire Witch loses track of a whole ice wall she built herself. Now Jin Hyuk's instincts somehow tell him to headbutt steel. He let the words hang there. The big man counted the victories on his thick fingers. 3 freak outcomes. 3 opponents who shouldn't have lost that way. He asked what the common factor was. The scarred fighter leaned in. He whispered that some of the guys were calling it the Phantom Curse. Bad luck that only ever seems to help one man. Seok-jun didn't blink. He pointed out that Daeho had lost his last 4 fights by knockout. Maybe he should spend less time counting other people's wins. A muscle twitched in Daeho's jaw. The refrigerator uncrossed his arms. Siwoo's fingers tightened on the tablet. The kid was ready to start recording, but Seok-jun just walked forward. He passed between Daeho and the scarred fighter like they were furniture. His shoulder brushed the big man's chest. Daeho didn't move. Neither did the other 2. They just watched him pass with cold, measuring stares. Seok-jun didn't look back. Siwoo scurried after him, nearly tripping over his own feet. The locker room door slammed shut. The kid exhaled for what sounded like the first time in a minute. He said that was bad. The rumor mill was spinning faster than they'd anticipated. 3 weird wins in a single tournament was too much noise. Seok-jun unwrapped his hands. The tape peeled away with a dry rasp. He said Daeho was a drunk looking for attention. But Si-woo shook his head. Daeho wasn't the real threat. He was just a symptom. The problem was the story he represented. The kid pulled up a forum thread on his tablet. It already had 4,000 views. The title read, Phantom Step, Weaponized Luck or Something Else. Dozens of accounts were dissecting the Jin-hyuk knockout frame by frame. Someone had posted slow-motion footage from a phone camera. It showed the exact moment Jin-hyuk's temple met the steel panel. The comments were a feeding frenzy. A user called Fight Science 101 claimed the dodge vector made no sense. Jin-hyuk had evaded a punch that never arrived. Another account, Ringrat99, pointed out the same thing happened with Yoon's chain trip. Impossible positioning, unless Seok-jun could see the future. Si-woo's jaw was tight. He said the analysts were getting bolder. Young's public thread had given them permission to dig. The phantoms of the internet no longer had to hide in private channels. Seok-jun stared at the footage. His own body looked alien in freeze frame. Mid-stride at a 45-degree angle that no referee had questioned. And then Si-woo's tablet pinged. A new notification. Not a forum alert, something bigger. The kid's face went from pale to gray in half a second. He turned the screen around. A video teaser was trending on the tournament's official social channel. The thumbnail showed Seok-jun's face from the Yoon match. The title was a single sentence. How does the undefeated Phantom really win? The uploader was Gu Sung-ho. Si-woo said the name like it was poison. Gu Sung-ho was a former fighter turned content vulture. The guy had been kicked out of the circuit 2 years ago for match fixing. Now he ran a video channel with 500,000 subscribers. His whole brand was exposing fighters' secrets, technique breakdowns, hidden injuries, psychological weaknesses. He'd ruined at least 3 careers. And now he was pointing his lens at the Phantom. The teaser was 30 seconds long. It showed a montage of Seok-jun's wins in the tournament. Each clip paused at the moment of the anomaly. The Yoon trip, the ice wall confusion, the Jin-hyuk self-knockout. A deep voice narrated over the footage. It asked what the viewer was really seeing. Skill or something beyond skill. The teaser ended with a promise. Full expose dropping after the semifinals. Gu Sung-ho's face filled the frame. He was grinning like a man who'd already cashed the check. He told his audience to stay tuned. The truth was stranger than fiction. Si-woo lowered the tablet. His voice was tight. He said Gu didn't have proof. But he didn't need proof. He just needed enough innuendo to force the committee's hand. If the video went viral, an official investigation would follow. And investigations meant questions. Questions Seok-jun couldn't answer truthfully. The locker room felt colder. Seok-jun's fists clenched at his sides. The tape residue left pale smudges on his knuckles. He asked what they could do to kill the story before it hatched. Si-woo was already typing. His fingers flew across the tablet screen. The kid was muttering to himself. Speed and direction. Frame gaps. Visible tells. He looked up with something sharp in his eyes. He had an idea. It was risky, and it was insane. But it might just work. He said they needed to give the internet a different answer. A believable answer. Something that explained the anomalies without supernatural bullshit. He pulled up an old martial arts forum. The page was covered in grainy diagrams of pressure points and nerve strikes. The kid pointed to a term buried in the text. Pulse timing, an obscure technique from a defunct school of combat. The theory was simple. A fighter could read the micro-rhythms of an opponent's body. Pulse, breath, muscle twitch, eye movement. By syncing with those rhythms, a master could anticipate strikes before they launched. It looked like precognition, but it was just extreme pattern recognition. No magic, no time stop, just a freakish level of sensory training. Seok-jun stared at the diagrams. He asked if anyone still practiced this. Si-woo laughed. The school had died out 30 years ago. Its last master took his secrets to the grave. There were no living practitioners. No one to debunk the claim. It was the perfect cover. You can plant the idea that Seok-jun had studied pulse timing in secret. An ancient art rediscovered. A lost technique brought back to the modern arena. The internet would eat it up. Si-woo laid out the plan. First, he'd seed the theory across the forums. Anonymous accounts, fake insiders, cryptic posts hinting at the Phantom's secret training. Then they'd need a demonstration. A public performance. Something visual and undeniable. Seok-jun asked what kind of performance. Kid's grin was almost feral. He wanted the Phantom to fight blindfolded. Not in a real match, a controlled demo, a live-streamed exhibition where Seok-jun would dodge and counter without sight, using nothing but pulse timing. Or so the world would believe. Seok-jun considered it. The risk was enormous. If he failed, the fraud would be exposed instantly. But if he succeeded, the anomaly narrative would collapse. Gu's expose would look like a jealous has-been grasping at shadows. The Phantom nodded once. Set it up. Siwoo got to work. Within 4 hours, the forum threads were live. An account called Old School Scholar posted a grainy scan of a martial arts text. Text described a technique called the Echo of the Empty Hand. Another account, Ring Historian 88, claimed to have witnessed Seok-jun training with a blindfold 3 years ago. A third post connected the dots. It suggested the Phantom's freak timing wasn't a curse. It was the resurrection of a lost art. The comments exploded. Half the forum called it ridiculous. The other half was suddenly very curious. And then the tournament's official media channel announced a special event. Tomorrow night, the undefeated Phantom would demonstrate his technique in a live exhibition. The post teased a blindfold. The word spread like gasoline on a fire. Gu Sung-ho's teaser was suddenly competing with a counter-narrative. His expose looked like yesterday's news. The following evening, a small crowd gathered in a secondary ring at the Titan Dome. Cameras lined every angle. A live feed was streaming to hundreds of thousands of viewers. Seok-jun stood in the center of the ring. A black silk blindfold covered his eyes. Siwoo stood at ringside. The kid's tablet was synced to the broadcast. He was monitoring the chat in real time. The audience held its breath. Siwoo called out a sequence. 2 jabs from the left, a low kick, a hook from the right. He spoke the attacks as if commanding a drone. Seok-jun's body responded before the words finished. His head slipped the first jab. His shoulder rolled under the second. His shin checked the low kick with a crack of bone on bone. The hook sailed over his ducking spine. The crowd gasped. Siwoo called another sequence. Faster this time. Mixed cadence and irregular angles. Seok-jun flowed through the invisible attacks like water. He weaved. He parried empty air. He sidestepped. Every motion was precise and fluid and impossible. The blindfold never shifted. His breathing was steady. The chat feed went ballistic. Pulse-timing believers were screaming that they'd told everyone so. The skeptics were scrambling for explanations. One commenter swore the Phantom must have an earpiece. Another claimed Siwoo was cueing him with subtle hand signals. But the cameras showed no hidden tech. Just a blindfolded man dancing through a storm he couldn't see. Seok-jun finished the demonstration with a single, precise punch. He struck a padded target held by an assistant. The blow landed dead center. No sight. No hesitation. The assistant stumbled backward. The blindfold came off. Seok-jun's eyes were calm and dry. He hadn't activated the time stop. He hadn't needed to. The last 3 days of drilling with Siwoo had built a temporary reflex, a shell game of audio cues and mapped spatial memory. It wasn't real pulse timing, but it looked exactly like magic. Siwoo stepped into the ring. He announced to the cameras that the Phantom was willing to undergo any committee review. The technique was real. The skill was earned. The kid threw Gu Sung-ho's channel name into the conversation. He invited the content creator to attend a private demonstration, answer any questions, debunk the debunker. The chat went nuclear. Gu's video suddenly looked like a hit piece. The comments on his teaser flipped overnight. Viewers accused him of manufacturing drama for clicks. The Phantom was just a freak genius with a forgotten martial art. Nothing supernatural about it. Just years of brutal, unseen training. Narrative had turned. Seok-jun watched the chat numbers spike from the locker room. Siwoo collapsed onto a bench. The kid was drenched in sweat and grinning like a maniac. He said they'd bought themselves time. Not forever, but enough to reach the semi-finals. And then his tablet pinged again. A private message from an encrypted account. The sender was Gu Sung-ho. The message was short. 2 sentences. He congratulated the Phantom on a brilliant performance. And then he said he had footage from 6 years ago, a fight where Seok-jun's timing defied even pulse theory. The footage would drop after the semifinals, no matter what narrative the Phantom spun. Siwoo's grin died. He said Gu had something older, something they hadn't accounted for. Seok-jun stared at the message. 6 years ago was before the disinformation campaign, before the leg fatigue lie, before the emotional trigger plant. It was raw footage from his underground days, when he'd been sloppier, more visible, more supernatural. He closed his eyes. Calm in the storm was still there, but the storm was growing. And Gu Sung-ho had just thrown another lightning bolt into the sky. Siwoo stared at the message. 2 sentences from Gu Sung-ho had just collapsed their entire counter-narrative. The kid's fingers hovered over the tablet, and then the locker room door slid open. Na Hae-jin stepped inside. The arena manager carried a slim leather folder under one arm. Her heels clicked once on the concrete. She didn't knock. She never knocked. Siwoo flipped the tablet face down in a blur of panic. The manager's smile was thin and sharp. She said she had something that might interest the Phantom. Seok-jun didn't move from the bench. His eyes tracked the folder in her hand. Na Hae-jin set the folder on the metal table between them. She opened it. Inside were 3 photographs. First showed Jung Do-yoon in a darkened gymnasium. A syringe glinted in his hand. The timestamp read 11 months ago. The second photograph captured a blood test document. Jung's name was printed at the top. Several markers were circled in red ink. Abnormal platelet counts. Elevated synthetic erythropoietin. The third image was a still frame from a security camera. Jung was exchanging a thick envelope with a man in a white coat. The coat had the Titan Dome medical insignia stitched on the pocket. Siwoo's breath caught. Na Hae-jin said the blood work was real. She had pulled it from an independent lab that serviced 17 pro fighters. Lab tech owed her a favor. The photographs were taken by a private investigator she'd hired 6 weeks ago. She'd been watching the analyst for months. Not because she liked Seok-jun. Because Jung Do-yoon was a cancer in her tournament. He bribed medical staff. He paid fighters to throw data at his models. He treated the championship like a spreadsheet, and she was done letting him poison her bracket. She proposed a trade, a simple one. Seok-jun would sit for an exclusive interview about his technique. A controlled interview. Nothing that revealed the secret, just enough to feed the pulse-timing narrative with official weight. In exchange, she would bury the doping evidence. Not destroy it, bury it. She'd hold it as leverage and promise not to release it. Unless Jung forced her hand. Siwoo's eyes went wide. The kid immediately saw the play. An official interview from the tournament's own mouthpiece would do more than any forum thread ever could. It would make pulse timing half legend. It would put Gu Sung-ho's expose in a body bag, and it would give them a knife to hold at Jung's throat without ever stepping into the ring with him. Seok-jun asked what the catch was. Na Hae-jin said there was no catch, just the trade. She wanted a clean tournament. He wanted his secret to stay buried. They could help each other. The Phantom didn't answer right away. He looked at Siwoo. The kid was already running the angles. He murmured that they could delay the interview until after the semifinals. Let Gu drop his old footage. Let the internet scream for a day and drop the interview like a bomb right before the finals. 2 narratives would collide, and the official one always won. Na Hae-jin tilted her head. She said that was an interesting timeline. But she wanted the interview locked in now. A signed agreement. A date. Seok-jun could pick the date, but she needed the commitment. The Phantom nodded. He said he would do it after the tournament. No distractions before the final fight. Na Hae-jin considered this. Then she smiled. She said that was acceptable. But she warned him. Jung Do-yoon was not just an analyst. He had connections deep in the fight circuit. People who owed him. People who feared him. If he discovered the doping file existed, he would burn half the bracket to get it back. She advised Seok-jun to keep this quiet. Tell no one except the kid, not even Kang Min-suk. The speedster had a big mouth and bigger pride. Seok-jun gave a single nod. Siwoo asked if they could see the full blood report. Na Hae-jin slid a USB stick across the table. It was black, no label. She said it contained everything. The lab results, the investigator's notes, the security stills in high resolution. A gift. She didn't need to keep the only copy. She trusted the Phantom to use it wisely. Siwoo snatched the USB like it was made of gold. His eyes were already burning with new plans. He asked if she had any footage of Jung's doping from the tournament itself. In competition tests. Na Hae-jin shook her head. Jung was too careful for that. He cycled off before entering the arena, but the out-of-competition blood work was damning enough. If it leaked, Jung would face a lifetime ban. No analyst would ever touch him again. His whole career would detonate. Seok-jun asked why she hadn't released it already. Na Hae-jin's expression flickered, just for a moment. She said she'd been waiting for the right moment. The right ally. She couldn't drop the file alone without looking like a vengeful manager. But if the undefeated Phantom was the one holding the grenade, that changed the optics. He was the victim. She was just the administrator cleaning house. Siwoo muttered that it was ruthless. Na Hae-jin didn't disagree. She said the fight world was ruthless. Always had been. Seok-jun stood up. He extended his hand. A deal was struck. The manager shook it once, firm and cold. She collected her folder and walked to the door. Before leaving, she paused. She said Gu Sung-ho wasn't the only one with old footage. Jung had been collecting anomalies for 2 years. If the analyst ever got desperate, he would release everything. Every frame, every timestamp, every impossible dodge. So the Phantom had better win this tournament, and he had better do it clean. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut. Siwoo let out a long breath. He said they'd just been handed a nuclear option. And a new deadline. Gu's footage would drop after the semifinals. Jung's archive was hanging over their heads. The interview could neutralize Gu, but the analyst's threat was still growing. Seokjun stared at the USB stick in Siwoo's hand. A plastic black rectangle. Inside it was the power to destroy Jung Do-yoon's entire career. And yet, the Phantom didn't look relieved. He looked like a man who'd just seen another move on the board. Another piece sliding into a trap. Because Jung wasn't stupid. If Na Hae-jin could find his blood work, Jung could find her investigator. He could trace the leak. He could counter the counter. Siwoo saw the concern on Seok-jun's face. He said they'd need to be careful. Couldn't use the file until the exact right second. 1 frame too early. And Jung would disappear into the shadows. 1 frame too late. And his footage would already be on every screen in the hemisphere. Seok-jun asked if the interview could be done quietly. No cameras. Just a printed statement. Siwoo shook his head. Na Hae-jin wouldn't accept that. She needed the visual, the mask of credibility. The Phantom would have to sit in front of a lens, answer questions, control his face, sell the lie. It would be the hardest performance of his life. The kid had an idea. He said they could script the whole thing. Every answer, every pause, every blink. A choreographed illusion. The Phantom had already proven he could move blind. Now he just had to talk blind. Seok-jun almost smiled. Almost. He told Siwoo to start drafting the script. They had 2 days until the semifinals, and after that, Gu Sung-ho would drop his bomb. Then the interview would go live 24 hours later. A 1-2 punch. Burial and resurrection in the same news cycle. Siwoo opened his tablet. He began typing furiously. The kid was a machine again. No fear, just tactics. Seok-jun sat back down on the bench. He looked at his taped fists. 10 years of undefeated fighting. 10 years of a promise to a sister under a cherry tree. And now the whole structure was balancing on a liar's script and a USB stick. He closed his eyes. But the storm had teeth now, real teeth, and it was circling closer. The next morning, Siwoo's tablet lit up like a fire alarm. Notifications poured in faster than he could swipe them away. The blindfolded exhibition video had breached the containment of the fight forums. It was everywhere now. Mainstream news feeds, sports channels, reaction streamers with jaw-dropped thumbnails. The clip of Seok-jun dodging a padded strike without sight had racked up 11 million views overnight. And the comment section was a war zone. Believers screamed about ancient martial arts. Skeptics demanded a medical investigation. The hashtag, pulse timing hashtag, trended in 3 countries. Siwoo stared at the screen, his reflection pale and small in the glass. This was exactly what he'd wanted. And it was also a massive problem. Because when something goes that viral, the suits start paying attention. The suits being the tournament committee. An official notice arrived via the Titan Dome's encrypted communication channel. Siwoo's tablet pinged with an aggressive chime he hadn't heard before. He opened the message and read it twice. Then he read it a 3rd time, hoping the words would rearrange themselves. They didn't. The committee had scheduled a mandatory physical examination for Gong Seok-jun. The exam was set for the next morning at 9 o'clock. Inside the dome's medical wing. The stated reason was to rule out performance-enhancing methods. But Siwoo knew the real reason. 3 weird wins, a viral video, an undefeated Phantom. They wanted to strip away the mystery and find the man underneath. And if they found something unnatural, the tournament was over. Seok-jun's 10-year promise would end in a lab room, not a ring. Siwoo didn't panic. He just stared at the notice and let his brain kick into overdrive. A medical exam is a trap if you can't control the results. But what if you could? He reached for his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't touched in 2 years. A name from his academy days. Someone who owed him a very large, very illegal favor. He stepped out of the locker room and into the concrete corridor where the signal was stronger. Call connected on the 3rd ring. A groggy voice answered. Siwoo didn't bother with small talk. He told the guy he needed a medical document. A very specific one. A diagnosis for a rare neurological condition. Something that explained inhuman reaction speed without breaking the laws of physics. The voice on the other end laughed. Then it stopped laughing when Siwoo named his price. $10,000, wired immediately. The voice asked what the condition should be called. Siwoo already had a name. Congenital hyperresponsive neural pathways. CHNP. It sounded like a real disease. The contact, a former neurologist who lost his license for creative billing, agreed. Within 2 hours, Siwoo's tablet received a PDF, 13 pages of dense medical jargon, nerve conduction graphs, and a family history of latent synaptic anomalies. The document claimed Seokjun's reaction time fell in the 99.9th percentile, fast enough to anticipate a strike before the opponent's muscle even twitched. Pulse timing, but with a biological basis. Siwoo read it and almost believed it himself. He printed 2 copies on official-looking paper with a forged hospital letterhead. Then he sat down with Seokjun and went over every line, every phrase they'd need to echo if questioned, every potential landmine in the fake history. Seokjun memorized it in 5 minutes. His face didn't show a flicker of doubt. Just that same stone-cold calm. Calm that had carried him through 10 years of impossible fights. Siwoo pocketed the USB with the doping evidence and the new medical report. 2 grenades, 2 different enemies, and 1 exhausted kid holding both pins. The next morning, the Titan Dome's medical wing was cold and smelled of antiseptic. Seokjun walked in wearing a simple gray training shirt and black shorts. No fanfare. The committee had assigned 3 doctors, 1 neurologist, 1 cardiologist, and 1 general practitioner with a face like a clenched fist. They led him to a room full of machines, wires, electrodes, reflex hammers, a treadmill, a rack of syringes. The GP asked Seokjun to sit on the examination table. He did. The neurologist attached electrodes to his temples, his forearms, his calves. A machine beeped in slow rhythm, tracking nerve impulse speeds. Seokjun's pulse was 62 beats per minute. Dead steady. Good luck rattling that. The cardiologist fitted a heart monitor and watched the screen like it owed her money. They tested his reflexes first. A small hammer tapped his knee. His leg shot up in an instant. The neurologist noted the response time, 0.08 seconds. Better than average, but not impossible. They asked him to track a pen with his eyes, to touch his nose with his finger, to walk a straight line heel to toe. He did everything with the same unhurried precision. No tremor, no hesitation. The neurologist picked up Siwoo's forged report and studied it again. He asked about the family history. Seokjun, in a low voice, told him his father had the same condition. Fast reflexes. Died young, in a construction accident. Nothing to do with the nerves. The lie was so smooth it felt like truth. The GP frowned but said nothing. They moved to the treadmill next. They cranked the speed until Seokjun was sprinting at 20 kilometers per hour. Heart rate climbed to 160. Blood pressure spiked. But his reaction times, measured by blinking lights on a screen, actually improved. The neurologist muttered something to the cardiologist. They stepped out of the room, leaving Seokjun alone with the humming machines. Sweat dripped down his neck. Not from the run, from the pressure of holding the secret in a room full of sensors. If he activated the time stop, even for 1 second, they'd know. But he didn't. He just breathed and waited. The doctors returned. They said they'd need a blood sample to rule out stimulants. Seokjun extended his arm without a word. The needle went in. 3 vials filled. The GP capped them and labeled each one with a barcode. No visible trace of doping, of course, but the blood would be tested for everything. Synthetic adrenaline, neural accelerants, even exotic compounds that didn't have names yet. Siwoo had assured him the fake condition wouldn't show up in blood work. CHNP was a neural architecture thing, not a chemical one. Lab wouldn't find anything abnormal, except maybe a man who was just born fast. After the blood draw, the neurologist asked one final question. He wanted to know if Seokjun had ever dissociated during a fight. A moment where time seemed to stop. Seokjun's pulse didn't jump. He said he didn't understand the question. The neurologist nodded and closed his folder. The exam was over. 2 hours later, the committee convened in a private boardroom. Seokjun and Siwoo waited in the corridor outside. Siwoo's leg bounced like a jackhammer. Seokjun sat motionless. The door opened. The neurologist emerged, holding a folder. He told Seokjun the examination results were consistent with the submitted medical history. The blood work came back clean. No drugs, no banned substances. The nerve conduction studies showed heightened synaptic response within the documented range of CHNP. The committee, after review, would issue a formal clearance. Seokjun was medically approved to continue. Across the city, in a quiet wing of St. Helena's care facility, Jung Do-yoon pushed open a heavy door. The air smelled of antiseptic and fresh linen. A nurse nodded as he passed. Room 204 was at the end of the hall. Lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow. A single window overlooked a courtyard of bare cherry trees. In the center of the room, a woman sat in a motorized wheelchair. Her name was Jung Soo-ah. She was 28 years old, and she hadn't moved a muscle below her neck in 10 years. The ventilator hummed with a steady mechanical rhythm. Her eyes were open. They tracked Jung as he stepped inside. He set his bag on the visitor's chair and pulled up a stool. His sister's face was thin but peaceful. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. She blinked once. That was hello. Jung opened a small notebook. He told her the tournament was going as planned. The Phantom was still undefeated, still hiding his secret. He told her the quarterfinal had just ended, another freak win. But his model was almost complete. He leaned closer and whispered that the finals were 2 weeks away. Then he dragged the truth into the open. Soo-ah's eyes flickered. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Jung wiped it with his thumb. He promised her he'd make it right. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled photograph. It was taken 11 years ago. Soo-ah laughing on a beach. Before the crash. He placed the photo on her bedside table. Then he sat in silence and watched the ventilator rise and fall. The room was so quiet he could hear the blood in his ears. He still remembered the night it happened. Jung wasn't there. He was cramming for a medical physics exam in his dorm room. The call came at 2:47 a.m. His mother's voice. Soo-ah had been in a taxi. A drunk driver had blown through a red light at the intersection of Highway 7 and Mill Road. The collision involved 3 cars. One of them was an old sedan. Inside were a brother and a sister, Gong Seok-jun and Gong Seo-yeon. Jung found the police report 2 days later. The drunk driver had hit the sedan first. The sedan spun and hit the taxi. Then the sedan's fuel line ruptured. The explosion sent a wave of molten debris into the air. A chunk of the engine block tore through the taxi's roof. It crushed Soo-ah's spine. She was 22 years old. Seok-jun walked away without a scratch. His sister died at the scene. The reports called it a freak accident. Jung didn't buy that. He spent months pulling every scrap of data. Traffic cameras, dash cams, seismic sensors. That's when he found the anomaly. One frame from a security camera near the intersection. Seok-jun was inside the car. Then he wasn't. He was 20 feet away, on the pavement. No intermediate motion. The frame was black for exactly 10 seconds. The timestamp jumped. The world had paused. And in that pause, something had shifted. The explosion's trajectory had changed. Jung cross-referenced the debris field with the physics models. A chunk of engine block should have missed the taxi. It should have flown wide by 12 inches. But it didn't. It veered. Like something had nudged it during the frozen instant. Jung built a simulation on his laptop. He ran it 200 times. The result was always the same. No matter how he adjusted the variables, the debris only hit the taxi if time stopped. He stared at the screen for 3 hours. His hands were shaking. Then he closed the laptop and made a vow. He would learn everything about Gong Seok-jun's ability, and he would use that knowledge to destroy him. Next morning, Jung withdrew from his graduate program. He sold his textbooks and his laptop. He bought a ticket to the nearest underground fighting circuit. Gong Seok-jun was already a legend. 300 wins, 0 losses. Jung began collecting footage. Every frame, every angle, every opponent. He discovered the pattern within 6 months. The flicker, the impossible displacement. Seok-jun's secret was a 10-second time stop. 1 use per fight. Jung called it Project Stillness. He rented a small workshop in an industrial district. A cramped concrete box with no windows. 1 table, 1 computer, a rack of electronics. His goal was simple. Build a device that could detect the temporal stall. If the world froze, he needed to know. He spent 9 years on it. He partnered with a disgraced physicist who had once worked on gravitational wave detectors. They designed a wristband that monitored Planck-scale vibrations. A sudden flatline meant time had stopped. They built 10 prototypes. 9 failed. The 10th worked. It was a slim titanium band with a black face. Inside was a micro-gyroscope tuned to quantum noise. When the world froze, the vibrations died. The band would emit a silent pulse. Jung tested it in an old subway tunnel. He froze a high-speed camera and checked the timestamps. The wristband triggered at the exact millisecond. He had a counter. Now he needed a plan. Jung Do-yoon stood up from the stool in room 204. He kissed his sister's forehead. He told her he'd be back after the finals. Then he stepped into the hallway and pulled out his phone. The tournament newsfeed was buzzing. Gong Seok-jun had cleared a mandatory physical exam. Some fake nerve condition, Jung smirked. He knew it was a cover story. The disinformation was clumsy. He'd been tracking Siwoo's forum activity for weeks. The kid wasn't half as clever as he thought. Jung slid his phone back into his pocket and walked to the elevator. He was calm. His counter was ready. His model was ready. He had 2 years of anomaly footage locked in a secure server. When the time was right, he'd dump it all. But first, he needed to watch one more fight. Seok-jun's semifinal was in 3 days. The opponent was An Jae-won, a psychic who could read intentions. Jung had already fed him the false intel. Leg fatigue. Sister insults. It didn't matter if it was fake. Jung's real weapon was the wristband. He slipped it onto his wrist as he walked through the facility's front doors. The evening air was cold. He checked the band's status light. Solid green. Good. The machine was hungry. The arena lights bathed the octagon in cold white. Seok-jun rolled his shoulders as the announcer called his name. The crowd murmured, a low tide of noise that never quite broke into applause. He stepped inside the cage and ignored it all. An Jae-won already stood in the opposite corner. The psychic's face was blank, his pupils unnaturally still. His hands rested loose at his sides. He didn't bounce, didn't shadowbox, didn't blink. An Jae-won had not lost a match in 10 years. The announcer's voice swelled, reciting the undefeated streak like a sacred text. Seok-jun tuned the words out. He touched the black wristband snug around his forearm. The light under the fabric glowed solid green. Jung's false intel was a nice touch, but the wristband was the real card. It would record every anomaly vector An produced. After the fight, the data would feed the machine. Seok-jun just had to win first. The bell rang. Seok-jun didn't wait. He reached for the zone inside his skull and pulled. The world blanched. Colors desaturated into frozen pewter. The stands became a sculpture of stopped mouths and raised fists. The clock on the jumbotron stuck at 3 seconds. 10 seconds. Seok-jun had 10 seconds of paused reality. He sidestepped the spot where An had been standing and circled behind. His fist was already chambered, aimed at the base of the psychic's skull. A clean, fight-ending shot. He threw it. His knuckles cut empty air. An Jae-won's head tilted 2 inches to the right. The dodge was small, minimal, and completely wrong. It should not have happened. Seok-jun froze inside his own stopped world. He saw An's eyes shift. The irises moved. They tracked him. Seok-jun disengaged and scrambled backward. An turned to face him. Inside the gray stillness, the psychic's lips moved. Seok-jun read the shape of the words. He spoke of holes. Holes in time that gaped like wounds. Seok-jun's time stop wasn't seamless. It leaked intention through tiny tears. An could sense each tear. The 10-second window closed. Reality snapped back like a rubber band. The crowd roared at the sudden positional change. An's expression remained flat. He didn't press the attack. Seok-jun's heart hammered against his ribs. He bought 3 seconds of distance and triggered the pause again. This time, he didn't move. He just watched An's face. The psychic's eyes pivoted slowly, finding Seok-jun even in the colorless void. An crossed the frozen mat in 3 unhurried strides. His fist connected with Seok-jun's liver. The impact detonated through the pause and sent Seok-jun skipping across the canvas. The world restarted as his back hit the mesh. Pain unspooled in a white sheet across his gut. The referee began a count. Seok-jun dragged himself upright at 6. He spat a mouthful of copper through the cage links. An stood at center ring, waiting. His knuckles were unbloodied. Seok-jun's ribs thrummed with a deep, spreading heat. The psychic had tagged him through stopped time. No one had ever done that. Seok-jun's undefeated streak suddenly felt like a fragile paper thing. He circled, breathing through the ache. The wristband still pulsed against his skin, still recording. He needed An to show him more. Jung would want the full data set. Seok-jun triggered the pause again. 10 seconds. He didn't attack. He just moved. He slid left, then right, then lunged without committing. Each feint left a small tear in time's fabric. An tracked every single one. His gaze jumped between the holes like a cat following moths. Seok-jun learned the rhythm of those eye movements. An's attention lagged by a fraction of a second when he switched targets. That lag was the only gap. Seok-jun let reality resume. He breathed. An tilted his head a degree. He told Seok-jun the holes smelled like copper wire and old rain. An could name the exact flavor of each intention. Seok-jun didn't answer. He pulled the pause again. This time he used the silence to grab a water bottle from the corner stool. He unscrewed the cap and poured it on the mat. The liquid hung in midair, a frozen glass ribbon. He placed the empty bottle on the canvas 3 feet to An's right. Then he retreated to the far edge of the cage. The world restarted. Water splashed across the vinyl. An's eyes flicked toward the noise. In that sliver of a second, Seok-jun fired a low kick straight into An's lead thigh. It landed. The psychic's leg buckled for a single heartbeat. The crowd gasped. Seok-jun didn't celebrate. He reset and circled. An tested the leg with a small shuffle and nodded once. He admitted the trap was clever. Seok-jun licked salt off his lip. He had another trap ready. He froze time again. He moved a medicine ball from the corner and balanced it on the top rope. He positioned a loose towel on the mat where An would retreat. 10 seconds expired. The ball wobbled and fell with a heavy thump. An glanced at it. His weight shifted to avoid the towel. Seok-jun was already there. He drove a straight right into An's floating ribs. The crack was audible. An exhaled a clipped grunt and backed into the cage. The psychic's face remained unreadable. He wiped his mouth with his wrist and looked at the smear of blood. Then he smiled. It was a thin, clinical expression. He told Seok-jun the holes were changing shape. They were getting smaller, tighter, harder to read. Seok-jun was adapting. An was delighted. The crowd sensed the shift and grew louder. Seok-jun's side still burned from the liver shot. But he had 2 clean hits now. The momentum was his. He pressed forward without the pause. No time stop, just straight boxing. He jabbed. An parried. He jabbed again. An slipped and countered with a short hook that Seok-jun ducked under. They traded in real time, a fast, violent exchange. Seok-jun's fists clipped An's guard repeatedly. An's ribcage showed the purple imprint of the earlier shot. Sweat dripped from his chin. Seok-jun backed him into a corner. The psychic's breathing was finally ragged. Seok-jun threw a feint high and went low, aiming for the bruised side. An's block arrived a half-beat slow. The punch landed deep. An's body folded around the impact. He slumped against the cage, one arm hooked over the top rope. The referee hovered. Seok-jun stepped back to let him look. An waved the ref away and straightened with visible effort. He reset his stance. His smile had gone. Now his eyes were only calculating. He said nothing. Seok-jun interpreted the silence as a wounded animal's final bluff. He would finish it with the pause. He pulled the trigger. 10 seconds of frozen light. He circled wide, picking up a medicine ball from the corner. He intended to throw it from An's blind spot and follow with a spinning back elbow. The sequence was flawless. He pitched the ball. It stopped 2 feet from An's temple. Seok-jun was already pivoting into the elbow. An moved. He didn't track the hole. He moved before the hole formed. His body flowed around the frozen ball as if he'd rehearsed the dodge 100 times. Seok-jun's elbow scythed through empty space. An's counterpunch came from nowhere. It was a shovel hook to the exact spot where Seok-jun's ribs were already cracked. The blow landed outside the time stop. It landed in the split-second gap between Seok-jun's attack and the end of the pause. An had timed the interval perfectly. Seok-jun's breath turned into ground glass. He collapsed to one knee. The pause ended. An stood over him. His fist was still clenched. He did not gloat. He just spoke 2 short sentences. He told Seok-jun the holes were bait. Seok-jun's adaptation had narrowed the tiers, made them smaller, more precise. That precision made the holes predictable. Seok-jun's own silence had turned his intentions into a bright, narrow beam. An didn't need to sense the holes anymore. He could guess them. Seok-jun's model was complete. The psychic raised his heel and stomped down on Seok-jun's exposed hand. Bone crunched. The referee lunged to separate them. An stepped back with his hands raised, compliant. Seok-jun cradled broken fingers against his chest. Blood threaded down his wrist and soaked into the wristband. The green light inside the fabric flickered and died. Pain had finally shorted the circuit. The medic team started to move toward the cage. Seok-jun shook his head at them. He forced himself upright. His right side was a mural of deep bruising and swelling. He couldn't make a fist with his left hand. But he was still standing. He could still activate the pause. He had one 10-second window left in him. He triggered it. The world grayed over. Even the drops of his own blood paused in the air like scattered rubies. Seok-jun took one wobbling step toward An. The psychic stood completely still. His head was slightly lowered. His eyes were closed. He wasn't tracking any holes. He wasn't guessing any intentions. He had simply stopped perceiving. Seok-jun threw a desperate haymaker with his good hand. On tilted away by pure reflex. The dodge was messy and late, but it worked. Seok-jun stumbled past him. He lost his footing on a frozen smear of water from the earlier trap. He fell. The impact never arrived inside the pause. He was suspended, horizontal, 2 inches above the mat. The 10 seconds ran out. Reality rushed back and slammed him flat. The canvas shuddered. The crowd went quiet. Seok-jun tried to move. His body refused. His right arm was pinned under his torso. His left hand was a useless, swollen knot. An Jae-won stood over him for a long, measured moment. The psychic's chest was streaked with blood and sweat. His bruised side was black and bulbous. But he was not the one on the floor. The referee knelt beside Seok-jun and began the count. Seok-jun's neck strained as he tried to lift his head. His vision grayed at the edges. The wristband sparked weakly and went dark forever. Siwoo's voice cut through the arena, screaming something. Seok-jun's leg twitched, but the command never reached the muscle. The bell rang. The referee crossed his arms over his head. An Jae-won's hand was raised. The announcer's voice boomed the verdict. Seok-jun had lost. His undefeated streak was over. 10 years of surviving the anomaly, 10 years of living inside stopped time, had ended on a water-slick canvas. Medics swarmed the cage with a stretcher. They rolled him onto a spinal board and strapped his neck. Siwoo pushed through the barricade, face ashen. He was shouting questions no one answered. An Jae-won stood at the center of the ring, accepting no congratulations. He looked down at Seok-jun's immobilized form. His expression held no triumph. He simply acknowledged that the model had held. The holes in time had been mapped and closed. The medics lifted the stretcher and carried it through the cage door. Seok-jun's eyes stayed open, fixed on the jumbotron. His own name blinked there below An's, marked red, tagged with a single cruel word. Defeated. Ceiling lights drifted past in a harsh white blur. The wristband slipped off his forearm as a medic cut away the sleeve. It clattered onto the stretcher rail, then the floor. No one picked it up. Seok-jun's fingers were already swelling, the purple bruise spreading from his knuckles to his wrist. He could feel the separate throb of each broken bone. The pain was a loud, steady hum. He let it fill his head. The machine would go hungry. Young's false intel, the leg fatigue, the sister insults, all evaporated. An had not needed to read Seok-jun's mind. He had simply measured the spaces between Seok-jun's thoughts. The ambulance bay was cold and smelled of antiseptic. Seok-jun's stretcher was loaded into a waiting transport. The doors closed. The last thing he saw was the arena facade, and its giant screen still replaying his collapse. The hero had fallen. There was no malfunction, no overturned call, no secret disqualification. Only the fact of the loss. It would stand in every record, in every highlight reel for the rest of his career. Seok-jun shut his eyes and let the ambulance carry him away. The medic peels the ice pack away and winces. The bruise has spread across Seok-jun's entire right side like spilled ink. Deep purple bleeds into sick yellow at the edges. Siwoo stops pacing long enough to look. His face goes from pale to ghost white. The medic presses 2 fingers along the ribcage and asks if it hurts to breathe. Seok-jun's jaw tightens. He tells the medic it's manageable. The medic doesn't look convinced. She wheels over a portable ultrasound and squirts cold gel onto his skin. The screen flickers with grainy black and white images of bone and muscle. Siwoo leans in, squinting at the monitor like he can read it. The medic runs the wand down the 5th rib, then the 6th. She stops on the 7th. A hairline shadow runs along the bone like a crack in porcelain. The medic exhales and says it's not a full fracture. She calls it a stress fissure, the kind that becomes a real break if you breathe on it wrong. Siwoo asks what that means for the finals. The medic caps the gel bottle with a loud click. She says 48 hours minimum, and that's generous. Seok-jun sits up, swinging his legs off the table. The movement sends a fresh jolt through his torso. His face betrays nothing. He tells the medic he'll take the 48 hours. The medic hands Siwoo a prescription sheet and a cold compress that straps around the chest. She warns that if he fights before the bone knits, 1 clean shot collapses the lung. Siwoo takes the sheet with trembling fingers. Seok-jun pulls his shirt down over the bruising and stands. The walk to the locker room takes twice as long as usual. Every step is measured. Every breath is shallow and deliberate. Siwoo hovers at his elbow like a nervous mother hen. The corridor stretches empty and silent. Most of the crew has already cleared out after the semi-final. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. Seokjun's shadow drags behind him, long and tired. Siwoo breaks the silence and asks if they should postpone the training drills. The champ doesn't break stride. He says they start tomorrow. The kid opens his mouth to argue. Seokjun cuts him off with a single look. The look says he's made his decision, and he has. The next morning breaks gray and cold over the Titan Dome's auxiliary gym. Steel rafters and concrete floors. No windows, just industrial lamps throwing harsh white cones. The room smells of sweat and chalk and old leather. Siwoo stands in the center of the ring, tablet in hand, a duffel bag of gear at his feet. Seokjun steps through the door with the cold compress strapped tight around his ribs. Bruises peek out from under the elastic band, darker than yesterday. Siwoo doesn't comment on the color. He just pulls up a new file on his tablet and gets to work. The screen shows a breakdown of Jung Do-yoon's known fighting pattern, or rather, the lack of them. Jung has no official match footage, no ranked bouts, no exhibition fights, no amateur record. The man is a ghost in the ring. Siwoo says they're fighting blind. He explains that Jung's real weapon isn't his fists. It's his ability to force the pause early and exhaust it before the fight actually starts. So the drill today is simple. Seokjun learns to win without freezing time. The champ nods once and steps into the ring. Siwoo straps padded targets to his own forearms. He looks ridiculous. A scrawny strategist playing sparring partner, but nobody else can know what they're working on. The first drill is feinting. Siwoo calls out a command and throws a slow right hook. Seokjun's job is to sell a dodge, then redirect without the pause. He sidesteps the hook, drops his shoulder, and pivots into a left body shot. The padded target absorbs the impact, but Siwoo still stumbles back 2 steps. He wheezes and asks if the champ can pull that punch a little. Seokjun's lip twitches, almost a smile. They run the drill again. And again. Each time, Siwoo changes the call-out, forcing a different feint pattern. Jab feint to overhand right. Cross feint to lead uppercut. Double feint to low kick. Seokjun's body remembers the shapes faster than his mind. 10 years of muscle memory doing the heavy lifting. By the 20th repetition, sweat drips from his chin. The cold compress has gone damp and warm. Siwoo calls for a water break. Seokjun leans against the ropes, breathing through the ache in his side. The kid scrolls through his tablet and pulls up a new section. Endurance drills. Siwoo explains that if Jung drags the fight past the 5-minute mark, the ribs become a liability, so they need to build a gas tank that runs on fumes. He sets a timer for 3 minutes. No time stop, just Seokjun, the heavy bag, and non-stop combinations. The buzzer sounds. Seokjun explodes off the ropes. Left, right, hooks and crosses, elbows and knees. The bag swings wildly on its chain. Each impact sends a vibration through his torso that makes his vision flicker. But he doesn't stop. Siwoo watches the clock, then watches the champ. The kid's knuckles are white around the tablet. At 2 minutes, Seokjun's combinations start to slow. At 2:30, a hook lands wrong and his ribs scream. He grunts through clenched teeth, keeps swinging. The buzzer sounds at 3 minutes exactly. Seokjun drops his hands. His chest heaves. The compress has ridden up, exposing the full bruise. Siwoo sets the tablet down and walks over. He doesn't ask if the champ is okay. He just hands him a towel and says they'll run it again in 10 minutes. Seokjun presses the towel to his face. His voice is muffled but steady. He tells Siwoo to make it 5. The kid shakes his head. But he's smiling. Just a little. They run 4 more rounds before noon. By the end, Seokjun can barely lift his arms. But his footwork is sharper. His feints are cleaner, and he hasn't touched the time stop once. Siwoo collapses onto a bench and declares the morning a success. Seokjun lowers himself onto the bench beside him, movements slow and deliberate. He stares at the heavy bag swinging gently on its chain. Then he asks the question that's been hanging in the air all morning. What's the plan for Jung's doping evidence? Before Siwoo can answer, the gym door swings open. Na Hye-jin steps inside, her heels clicking on the concrete. She's carrying a slim leather folder, same kind she used before. She crosses the gym floor without a word and places the folder on the bench between them. Seokjun doesn't open it. He just looks up at her. She tells him it's everything they have on Jung. Lab results, witness statements, security stills, bank transfers. She says it's enough to get him disqualified. But only if they release it at the right moment. Siwoo picks up the folder and flips through the pages. His eyes widen. He asks if this is the same file from the USB. Na Hye-jin shakes her head. She says this is new. deeper. She explains that her investigator found a second lab. One Jung used for microdosing before his own fights. The tests show synthetic erythropoietin, anabolic metabolites, and something called a beta receptor agonist. Siwoo reads the last line aloud. It enhances reaction time by suppressing tremor response. His voice goes quiet. He realizes Jung isn't just cheating. He's been chemically tuning himself to counter the time stop. Na Hye-jin nods. She says Jung's entire model depends on his own precision. If the doping comes out, his predictions collapse. The public turns on him. The committee has no choice but to pull him. Seok-jun takes the folder and scans the pages. His expression doesn't change, but his fingers tighten on the paper. He asks when she wants to release it. Na Hye-jin crosses her arms and leans against the ring apron. She says not until the finals. She wants Jung to step into the arena thinking he's already won. Then, mid-match, the files go public. The Titan Dome screens, the broadcast feed, every social channel. Siwoo's mouth opens. He asks if she's insane. That's a live sabotage of an active match. Na Hye-jin's eyes are cold. She says Jung tried to destroy the integrity of her tournament. She's just returning the favor. Seok-jun closes the folder. He says he has one condition. Na Hye-jin tilts her head and waits. The champ tells her he won't release it mid-fight. He'll do it himself. From the ring, he wants Jung to hear the accusation from his own mouth, in front of the entire world. The arena manager stares at him for a long moment. Then she smiles. It's not a warm smile. She says he's got more theater in him than she expected. She agrees to the condition. She warns him that once it's public, Jung will have nothing left to lose. A cornered analyst is more dangerous than a prepared one. Seok-jun hands the folder back to Siwoo. He says he's counting on it. Na Hye-jin turns to leave, her heels echoing toward the door. She pauses at the threshold and glances back over her shoulder. She tells him the finals are in 2 weeks. She tells him to be ready. Then she's gone. The gym falls silent again. Siwoo stares at the folder like it might bite him. He asks if the champ is really going to accuse Jung on live broadcast. Seok-jun pushes himself off the bench with a grunt. He says it's the only move left. If Jung controls the narrative, they lose. If they control it, Jung's counter falls apart. The kid runs a hand through his hair and exhales hard. He says okay. He'll prep a script. Something clean and devastating. Seok-jun nods and heads for the door. He's got 2 more days of drills before the 48 hours are up, and the clock is ticking. Night falls over the Titan Dome complex. The auxiliary gym goes dark. In the main arena, crew members run cables and test the massive overhead screens. The finals are 14 days away. Seok-jun lies on a cot in the medical bay, the cold compress replaced with a fresh one. The bruise has faded slightly at the edges, but the fissure is still there, a thin, dark line on the ultrasound. The medic checks his vitals one more time and gives him a clean bill for light training. No sparring, no contact. But he can move. Seok-jun thanks her and sits up. Siwoo appears in the doorway with 2 protein bars and a bottle of water. Tosses them onto the cot and says the script is ready. The champ unwraps a bar and takes a bite. He asks what it says. Siwoo pulls out his tablet and reads the opening line. He tells the crowd that the man standing across from him has been doping for 2 years. He tells them Jung paid off medical staff, cycled off before in-competition testing, and used chemical enhancement to build a predictive model. He tells them the wristband on Jung's left arm isn't just a tool. It's the final piece of a cheating apparatus designed to rig the Grand Zenith Championship. Seok-jun chews slowly. He says it's good. He asks if there's a backup plan. Siwoo's face hardens. He says if Jung doesn't break, they release the files to every news outlet in the country. Simultaneous upload. No takebacks. The champ finishes the protein bar and washes it down with water. He tells Siwoo he's done good work. The kid's ears go red. He mutters something about just wanting to see Jung's face when it all comes crashing down. Seok-jun almost smiles again. 2 weeks. That's all that's left. 2 weeks to heal a cracked rib. 2 weeks to master fainting without the pause. 2 weeks to prepare the accusation that will end Jung Do-yoon's career. The champ stares at the ceiling of the medical bay. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. He thinks about the analyst in his private booth, reviewing footage, adjusting his model. He thinks about the wristband on Jung's wrist, the one that buzzes when time freezes. He thinks about the moment the accusation hits the air, the look on Jung's face when the arena turns against him. Seok-jun closes his eyes. The pain in his ribs throbs in time with his heartbeat, but his mind is calm. He's got a plan. He's got 14 days, and he's got nothing left to lose. The 14th day dawns bright and cold. The Titan Dome parking lot fills before sunrise. Banners snap in the winter wind. The crowd roars even before the gates open. Inside the arena, the screens flicker to life with highlight reels of both finalists. Jung Do-yoon's segment is clean and ominous. Graphs, statistics, a cold-eyed portrait with no smile. Seok-jun's segment is chaos, knockouts, flash freezes, the blindfolded exhibition, the semi-final brawl. Announcer's voice booms through the speakers, hyping the undefeated Phantom against the mysterious analyst. Backstage, Seok-jun stands in the tunnel entrance. Siwoo tapes his fists with steady hands. The cold compress is gone. The bruise has faded to a pale yellow-green, but the fissure is still there, a ghost in the bone. Siwoo finishes the rap and steps back. He asks if the champ remembers the script. Seok-jun flexes his fingers and nods. He remembers everything. The announcer calls his name. The crowd erupts. Seok-jun walks into the light. The Titan Dome lights sear down on the blue corner. Gong Seok-jun stands in the center of the ring. His taped fists are loose at his sides. The yellow-green bruise has faded almost to nothing, but the ghost of the fissure still hums under his seventh rib like a tuning fork. Across the ring, Jung Do-yoon adjusts his spectacles with one slender finger. His face is a mask. No smirk, no nerves, just the still water stare of a man who's run this simulation 200 times. The announcer's voice booms through the arena speakers. He calls it, the undefeated Phantom versus the mysterious analyst. Nobody in the crowd knows about the folder, the USB, the script. They only know the numbers. 98 wins, 0 losses, 10 years of untouched glory. The bell shrieks. The crowd roars like a living thing, 30,000 throats spitting noise. Seok-jun settles into his stance. Weight on the balls of his feet. Breathe slow. He's got 20 seconds of normal time to read the opening. Jung doesn't bounce, doesn't circle, doesn't do any of the things a fighter does. He stands there, arms relaxed, one wristband gleaming under the lights. That sleek titanium band with the silent green pulse. Seok-jun's eyes flick to it. Then Jung's hand moves. So fast it's almost an afterimage. A dart, 2 inches of steel needle, and a tiny feather-tip fletching, slipping from the discreet slit in his forearm guard. It sails across the ring in a flat, wicked line, straight for the champ's throat. The trajectory screams poison. No time to think. Seok-jun grabs the stillness inside his mind and twists. The world freezes. Everything. Dust motes lock in the air like tiny glass beads. The roar of the crowd vanishes into a deep, perfect vacuum. The dart hangs 4 inches from his Adam's apple, motionless, a silver fang suspended in gelatin. Seok-jun exhales. 1 Mississippi. He steps to the right with no particular hurry, watching the dart float past the empty space where his neck used to be. 2 Mississippi. He reaches up and plucks the dart from the frozen air, careful to grip the uncoated shaft. 3 Mississippi. He brings it close to his eyes. The tip glistens with a viscous green sheen, the color of something that shuts down nervous systems. Neurotoxin, most likely. A strong one. The analyst didn't come to fight. He came to force a choice. Stop time or die. And the champ just paid 3 seconds. He turns his head toward Jung Do-yoon. The man is frozen like a photograph, but the champ's stomach drops. Jung's body is already coiled into a defensive shell. Legs planted wide, knees slightly bent, both arms raised to cover his head and ribs. The pose of a man who knew, the instant his dart left his hand, exactly what would happen next. The wristband on his left forearm glows solid green. Still works in the freeze. Seok-jun counts silently. He's got 7 seconds left, and Jung has locked himself into a position that could weather a hurricane. The champ doesn't hesitate. He lunges forward, frozen mat springing under his feet. He throws a straight right at Jung's exposed solar plexus. The guard is perfect. His knuckles stop an inch from the guy's crossed forearms, but even in stopped time, he can feel the geometry. No gap, no angle, no clean entry. A hook to the ribs. Same story. A low kick to the outside of the lead leg. Jung's shin is already turned to block with picture-perfect form. The analyst has spent 2 years studying every frame of Seok-jun's pause work, and he's positioned every limb to cancel the most common entry vectors. 5 Mississippi. Seok-jun circles, breath coming quicker now. That's when he sees it. A hair-thin wire, optical fiber thin, running from a seam in Jung's glove down to a flat pressure disc on the mat underneath his rear foot. The disc is no bigger than a coin, almost invisible against the steel grate floor. a dead man switch. The champ recognizes the tech from a dozen underground arenas. If he lands a clean body blow, the pressure plate completes the circuit the moment time resumes, and whatever payload is wired to the system triggers. Probably a high-voltage discharge from the electrodes embedded in Jung's forearm guard. Or something worse. Seokjun's mind runs the math. If he hits Jung while the disc is primed, the trap discharges into both of them at real-time speed. If he tries to disarm the wire, he'll chew through seconds trying to unpick the filament without setting it off. If he does nothing, time runs out, and Jung springs whatever secondary counter he's prepared. It's a masterpiece of spite. The analyst built a contingency for the contingency. 10 Mississippi. 7 Mississippi. He's been in the freeze for a handful of seconds. He has two choices. Burn the remaining time trying to disable the trap, or end the pause now and eat the loss. The champ makes the call cold. He releases the hold on reality. Time crashes back into the dome with a deafening roar. The dart clatters onto the mat where Seokjun would have been standing. He's 3 feet to the left, breathing hard, hands raised. 5 seconds of his one-use pause, still sitting useless in the tank like unspent ammunition in a jammed clip. He just threw his only weapon away. Jung Do-yoon's lips peel back in a thin, razor-line smile. The crowd is still screaming, but a strange hush ripples through the front rows as the spectators process what just happened. A dart on the floor, champ appearing somewhere he wasn't. No whistle from the referee, no rule against projectiles in the Grand Zenith Finals, apparently. The analyst doesn't press the attack. He stays in his shell, eyes tracking Seokjun with predatory patience. Bad move, right? Sacrificing the thing that makes him unbeatable. But the champ's expression doesn't flicker. He spits a bead of sweat off his lip and sets his feet. The wristband on Jung's arm pulses once, green light dimming, then brightening. It knows the freeze is over. And it knows the phantom is empty. The analyst asks him, voice flat as a spreadsheet, how it feels to fight without a crutch. Seokjun doesn't answer. He flexes his fingers and remembers the script Siwoo read him in the medical bay. The accusation. The USB. The doping evidence. That's still waiting. But first, he's got to survive a man who planned for this exact moment 14 days ago. Seokjun shuffles forward, keeping his guard high and tight. His ribs twinge with a deep, bone-deep ache, but it's manageable. The 48 hours of rest did their job. He flicks a jab at Jung's face. Jung slips it with a hair's breadth of movement, his cold, bespectacled eyes never leaving the champ's chest. Another jab. The analyst parries it with his right forearm, the wristband humming faintly with each contact. Seokjun tries a body shot, stepping in low. Jung absorbs it on his elbow and immediately pivots out of range, not even attempting a counter. He's not here to trade. He's here to wait. The crowd starts to murmur. This isn't the slugfest they expected. This is chess with broken bones. Seokjun can read the strategy now. Jung is preserving his energy, waiting for the moment the champ overcommits without the safety net of the pause. Every feint, every stance change is a silent invitation for Seokjun to gamble. And the champ knows what the analyst doesn't yet. He's got a script that will end this without a knockout, but he needs to survive long enough to deliver it. He decides to test the dart trap's range. He circles to Jung's left, forcing the analyst to pivot and keep the pressure plate under his rear foot. The wire glints in the overhead lighting. Seokjun fires a low roundhouse kick at Jung's knee. Jung checks it with his shin guard, absorbing the impact without flinching. No discharge. The switch only triggers on a clean body shot, so the champ has a narrow window. Land a blow to the head without closing on the torso. Good luck with that. When Jung's guard is welded to his ears, Seokjun steps in with a 3-punch combination. Jab, cross, hook. Each one slapped away or dodged. Jung's footwork is minimal, economical. He never lifts that back foot high enough to break the disc contact. Clever. The analyst's wristband flicks from green to amber. A new mode. Something else is warming up. Seokjun doesn't have time to guess what it is. He needs to change the rhythm. He does what Siwoo drilled into him for 2 weeks. He feints without the pause. A sudden drop of the right shoulder, the barest hint of a haymaker, and then he whips a shovel hook low to the floating rib. Jung reads it. Of course he reads it. The man's entire career is pattern recognition. But reading and avoiding are two different things. The analyst has to shift his weight to parry, and for a quarter second, his rear heel lifts just a fraction. The wire snaps taut. The pressure disc emits a barely audible click. Nothing happens yet. It's on standby. But the champ sees the flicker in Jung's composure. Trap is primed, but it didn't discharge because the blow didn't land on the torso. Seokjun doesn't press the advantage. He dances back, breathing hard. Jung's smile thins further. He mutters something about the champ's slow reflexes, baiting him to activate another pause that doesn't exist. Seokjun ignores it and resets. The toll of the freeze is settling in. Not a cost, no blood, no exhaustion, just the mental reality that his ace is spent. Every move from here on is mortal. Every mistake can be his last. He thinks about his sister's grave under the cherry tree. He thinks about Siwoo's face when he read the opening line of the accusation. And he thinks about that USB stick, snug in Siwoo's pocket up in the stands, waiting for the cue. The analyst slowly straightens from his defensive shell. A test. He knows the champ's 10 seconds are gone. The dart gamble worked. Now he's probing to see if there's any residual caution. Seokjun snarls and rushes in, looking desperate. That's the show. He throws a wild overhand right, deliberately leaving his chin open. Jung's eyes narrow. He slips the punch and drives a sharp elbow into the champ's shoulder. Seokjun grunts, staggering. The blow isn't crippling, but it's a message. You can't stop me now. The crowd gasps. The analyst presses, just a step. Not enough to unweight the disc, but enough to loom. He tells the champ that the data never lies. Seokjun wipes a smear of sweat from his brow and glares at the wristband. That thing is the linchpin. If he can disable it, Jung loses his live feedback loop. But the dead man switch complicates every move. He needs to separate the wristband from the wire without triggering the discharge. Or he needs to get the accusation out into the open before Jung springs whatever final counter he's hiding. Time. He just needs time. The champ circles, playing for the crowd. They sense something simmering. The underdog shift they've seen in every one of his fights. 30 seconds into the round, and neither fighter has landed a clean shot. The tension is unbearable. Jung's amber wristband flickers once, twice, then settles on a steady amber glow. Whatever it's measuring, the reading isn't good. The analyst's eyes cut to the giant overhead screens. They're showing replays of the dart freeze, the weird, stuttering footage that makes the crowd mutter, "Phantom step," under their breath. Seokjun takes a deep breath and makes a decision. He'll gamble on the dead man switch after all. But not with his fists, with his voice. At the right moment. For now, he settles into a defensive rhythm, conserving energy, watching Jung's patterns, and counting the seconds until he can spring the real trap. The analyst shifts his guard again, and the pressure plate re-engages with a soft hum only a few people in the front row can hear. Seokjun catches the sound and files it. He's got no time stop, but he's got a folder full of evidence and a microphone waiting in the announcer's booth. All he has to do is survive until the round break. Seokjun let his lead shoulder drop a full inch. The motion was deliberate and ugly. A grammar of exhaustion the analysts would flag immediately. Across the ring, Jung Do-yoon's mouth twitched. The undefeated champion of the 10-year circuit read the slump exactly as Seokjun intended. It was the body language of a fighter whose only weapon had run dry. A sharp jab slapped the air an inch from Seokjun's temple. Jung's follow-up hook was a textbook overcommitment, thrown with the confident weight of a man who believed the data. The strap of the analyst's wristband peeked out from under his glove. A matte black band studded with 2 amber diodes. Seokjun's eyes tracked it without lingering. He shambled backward and let his heels scrape the canvas. The sound a wet surrender. The crowd roared, sensing blood. Jung pressed forward, his combinations accelerating from precise to predatory. A 4-punch flurry stitched Seokjun's guard together, each blow a data point. Seokjun took 2 on the forearms and sold the third like it had cracked a rib. He stumbled into the ropes and gripped them for balance, his face twisted into a perfect mask of panic. The referee's shoes squeaked a step closer, then stopped. Jung's wristband flickered once, a private amber blink that only Seokjun's downward glance caught. The vibration was faint, a sub-vocal hum inside Jung's glove. It happened exactly when the clock on the arena wall stuttered a single frame. 1 second of frozen time. Seokjun had not triggered it. The dead man switch in the analyst's booth had. A diagnostic pulse designed to calibrate the wristband's sensitivity. Jung's thumb tapped his own glove twice in a rhythm that said, "System check passed." Seokjun's mind assembled the mechanism in the space between heartbeats. The vibration was the countermeasure. Jung's data compilation had mapped every one of Seokjun's time-stop intervals, frequencies, and trigger patterns from 3 months of surveillance. The wristband was tuned to that exact neural signature. The instant Seokjun pulled the trigger on a pause, a motor would buzz against Jung's skin, keeping him conscious and mobile during the freeze. An opponent who could counterattack inside stopped time. The data was flawless for every freeze Seokjun had ever thrown in public. But Seokjun had never thrown a useless one. He straightened from the ropes and took a slow breath, letting Jung read the resignation in his shoulders. The analyst smiled a thin, clean smile and reset to center ring. He was not rushing. He was waiting for Seok-jun to use the one ability that would automatically give Jung the advantage. A trap built on a decade of evidence. Seok-jun's gloves rose again, trembling just enough for the front row cameras. He feinted a low kick he had never thrown in his career and watched Jung's head tick in recognition. The analyst categorized it, dismissed it, and fired a straight right that split Seok-jun's guard on purpose. The punch landed on his shoulder. A minor impact given dramatic weight by Seok-jun's theatrical groan. He collapsed to one knee and heard the wristband hum again. A longer pulse this time. A manual trigger from the booth. The analyst stopped moving and stood over him, arms loose, head cocked. The 10-year undefeated streak had made Jung a scientist as much as a fighter. He trusted the numbers. Seok-jun's average freeze duration was 2.3 seconds. His maximum, a crisp 10 seconds in the semifinals 3 years ago. The data said he would not launch a pause from a kneeling position. The data said he would not waste a freeze on a short-range escape. The data said he would not trigger anything shorter than 2 seconds. So Jung stood there and let Seok-jun kneel, because the wristband's amber light was still solid, and the booth reported no neural activity. Seok-jun planted one glove on the canvas and pushed himself upright. His breathing was fast, shallow. The audible signature of a man whose plan had collapsed. The split second between his knees locking and his glove settling, he triggered the freeze. 1 second. Not a tenth more. The world went silent and still. Jung's wristband lit up like a dying firefly and transmitted a single sharp buzz into his wrist. The analyst's eyes did not react in the paused light, because his consciousness had not been jolted awake. He had felt the vibration, the proof that time was stopped, but he was not inside the freeze. The countermeasure required the vibration to register while the wearer's brain was still processing stopped time. 1 second was not long enough for Jung's cortex to bridge the gap. By the time the signals fired, the freeze was already gone. Seok-jun saw the wristband's diodes flicker, the amber shifting to a faint green diagnostic sequence. He stored the image. The ropes creaked back into motion. Jung's eyes narrowed, a glint of confusion crossing his face before the data scientist's discipline smothered it. He had felt the buzz. He was certain of it. But nothing had happened. Seok-jun gave him nothing to analyze. He simply stood up, rubbed his shoulder, and reset his stance with the weary patience of a journeyman. Jung's guard tightened, the clinical edge replaced by a needle of irritation. The wristband buzzed a second time a full 40 seconds later, when the analyst in the booth ran a manual calibration. Seok-jun marked the interval, 40 seconds between automated recalibrations. The deadman switch was not continuous. It was a ladder of pulses, each rung a window. New plan formed in the space of a straight jab that Seok-jun slipped with exaggerated effort. He would not attack Jung. He would not throw a single blow during any freeze. He would use the 10-second maximum freeze window, not to strike, but to dismantle the counter. And he would do it inside the gap between calibration pulses. The fight entered its third minute. Jung grew bolder, his combinations tightening back to their original surgical tempo. A left hook clanged off Seok-jun's temple guard. A right uppercut grazed his chin strap. Seok-jun absorbed the rhythm and counted the amber pulses. One every 40 seconds. Never exactly on the mark, always trailing the booth operator's reaction time. He let Jung build a rhythm of his own. A 4-strike sequence, a reset, an advancing step, another 4-strike sequence. The pattern repeated 7 times. On the 8th repetition, Seok-jun triggered a second 1-second freeze in the exact middle of Jung's third punch. Wristband buzzed. Jung's glove twitched mid-swing, and the punch sailed wide by 3 inches because Jung's muscles had been startled, not guided. The analyst corrected instantly, but his eyes made a second trip to the wristband. He understood now that Seok-jun was testing him. The data on Seok-jun's timing said he never used consecutive micro-freezes. The data said they were too costly in mental stamina. The data was wrong. Seok-jun retreated a half-step and let a tiny smile fracture the mask of exhaustion. It was the first genuine expression he had worn since the opening bell. Jung's jaw tightened. The analyst barked a command through his mouthpiece, the syllables mangled but unmistakable. He was telling the booth to run a full diagnostic. The wristband pulsed amber, amber, amber in rapid triplets, a system check sequence that would take exactly 3 seconds. Seok-jun waited 1 full heartbeat after the triplets ended. Then he activated the longest freeze he had ever thrown in a fight, 10 seconds. The arena became a photograph. Sweat droplets hovered midair between the ropes. The referee's lanyard hung motionless against his striped shirt. Jung Do-yoon stood frozen in the exact pose of a man reaching for his ear, his glove half lifted toward the earpiece that connected him to the analyst booth. The wristband on his right glove was still pulsing its post-diagnostic green. The lock icon on its tiny OLED screen disengaged for the next 2.7 seconds. Seok-jun walked forward with no urgency. He did not throw a punch. His hands moved to Jung's right glove, and his fingers found the release clasp that no opponent had ever been close enough to touch. 2 snaps, a soft mechanical click, and the wristband detached in his palm. He turned the device over in the frozen light, memorized the port layout, and pressed the tiny manual override stud that sat flush against the inner band. The OLED screen flashed a single word: paired. Seok-jun slipped the wristband into the waistband of his trunks, tucking it beneath the elastic where no camera could see. He returned to his original position, planted his feet exactly where they had been, realigned his gloves to the precise angle of his pre-freeze guard. The 10th second ticked away somewhere deep in his mind, a clock he had never once miscounted. Time crashed back into the ring like a wave. Jung's glove completed its journey to his ear, and his fingers tapped the earpiece housing. His voice was tight, the command directed at the booth. He wanted a recalibration now. The wristband did not answer. The analyst looked down at his bare wrist, the empty space where the black strap had been. The color drained from his face with the speed of a collapsing lung. His eyes tracked left, then right, then locked onto Seok-jun's utterly neutral expression. The crowd saw nothing. They saw Jung freeze in place, his lead glove dropping a fraction too low, his mouth opening with no sound. Seok-jun kept his breathing labored and his posture bent, the portrait of a beaten man who just happened to be still standing. He did not gloat. He gave Jung's data one last gift, a fighter too exhausted to have done anything. The bell screamed for the round break. Seok-jun dropped his gloves and walked to his corner with the deliberate gait of a man who just finished grocery shopping. Jung Do-yoon stood motionless at center ring, his right arm hanging uselessly, his left hand still touching the empty air where the wristband used to be. The amber beacon in the analyst's booth had gone dark, and no amount of frantic keystrokes would bring it back, because the device was no longer transmitting. In his corner, Seok-jun poured water over his head and let it run down his face. Hidden in the motion, he twisted the captured wristband inside his trunks until the OLED screen faced outward. Last entry on Jung's data log read, "Freeze signature detected. Duration 1.0 seconds. Pattern match. Anomalous." Below that, a single line of user-added commentary. "Subject is probing the dry fire. Counter remains viable." The commentary was time-stamped 90 seconds ago, written by the analyst who had compiled 3 months of surveillance data on Seok-jun's timing. The same analyst who had confidently assured Jung that no freeze under 2 seconds was tactically relevant. The same dataset that had predicted every move Seok-jun would make tonight. Seok-jun read the log and memorized it. Then he pressed the override stud 3 times in rapid succession, the sequence he had seen in the diagnostic menu. Wristband's screen blinked once and displayed a new message. Factory reset complete. The device went silent in his waistband, a dead piece of hardware that had just become the most valuable piece of evidence in the arena. Across the ring, Jung Do-yoon's eyes finally cleared. The analyst's training kicked in, and he began to reconstruct the missing seconds. The micro-freeze had been a probe, the 10-second freeze had been the weapon, and Seok-jun had not used it to land a single punch. He had used it to reach past the countermeasure that was supposed to be unbreachable. Jung's data compilation on Seok-jun's timing was not flawed. It was perfect. And Seok-jun had used that perfection to walk directly into the blind spot the data had created. Jung's whole body went rigid with a new kind of understanding. The wristband was gone. The booth was blind. The man across the ring, who had just spent half a round acting like a broken fighter, had not fired a single offensive freeze. He had simply removed the lock from the door. Seok-jun acknowledged the realization with nothing but a slow blink directed at the arena floor. He took his gum shield out and rinsed it in the corner bucket. The second round was 60 seconds away. He had a dead wristband, a microphone waiting in the announcer's booth, and a window of exactly 1 round to do what no opponent had done in 10 years. Make Jung Do-yoon fight without his data. The 60-second rest clock hung above the ring like a bleeding wound. Seok-jun dropped into his corner and let the stool take his weight. His own wristband flickered once and died. The sabotage was total. The screen a dead black square against his glove. The crowd roared as a towel sailed over the ropes from Jung's corner. Jung's team surrounded the undefeated champion with cold packs and tablets. None of them looked at the booth. None of them saw the man behind the dark glass raise his hand. Seok-jun had seen it 40 minutes earlier. The announcer, Kang Min-suk, had cornered him in the locker corridor before the fight. Kang had leaned against the cinder block with the tired smile of a man who had watched the same ugly movie for 10 years. He had warned Seok-jun that Jung Do-yoon purchased hours of private fight footage for every opponent. Every dodge pattern, every breathing tell, every freeze-frame micro-expression fed into the tiny computer strapped to Jung's left forearm. Kang had called it a rigged game and made an offer. He had already swapped the spare wristband in Jung's locker with a dummy unit. The dummy looked identical but broadcast nothing. All Seok-jun had to do was switch the real wristband for the dummy mid-fight. And in return, Kang Min-suk wanted one thing: an exclusive ringside interview, live, on the Titan Dome broadcast, the moment Seok-jun won. The favor was specific, and the price was the truth, going out over every screen in the country. Seok-jun had nodded once. Now, in the 60 seconds between rounds, a small amber light pulsed twice from the dark commentary booth. Kang Min-suk's signal. The dummy was already in Jung's locker. That part of the plan was done. Now the real wristband sat snug on Jung's left arm, still feeding data. Seok-jun let his eyes close for a single breath. He had 4 seconds of temporal freeze remaining from the first round. 4 seconds to blind a 10-year undefeated streak. The crash that gave humans temporal power had torn the world open a decade ago. 10 years of soldiers and athletes and predators learning to stretch frozen heartbeats into a weapon. 10 years of Jung Do-yoon pretending the wristband only provided harmless fitness metrics. And 4 seconds left to break that lie wide open. Seok-jun opened his eyes. The arena was a wall of phone screens and flashbulbs. Jung's cornermen peeled the ice pack off his neck. The clock ticked past 32 seconds. Seok-jun stood, and the movement looked casual. His body language was still the tired fighter, the man with a dead sensor and a fading chance. Inside his skull, the timer ignited. The world screamed and stopped. 40,000 voices flattened into a black vacuum. The concession carts froze mid-pour. The ring girls stood like painted wax figures at the edge of the apron. Jung Do-yoon became a statue, one arm raised to adjust his headgear, his mouth half open for a sip of electrolyte gel. Seok-jun was already moving. The canvas beat against his soles in dead, silent thuds. He passed Jung's frozen body and felt the displaced air cling to his skin like cold gauze. He reached down and found the clasp of Jung's wristband. The real wristband, the one that whispered Jung's opponent's every heartbeat and hesitation into his earpiece. Seok-jun's fingers were surgeon steady. The clasp gave way, and the device slid free. Amber lights still pulsed along its edge. Hungry little eyes, still reading data from a fight that, from the computer's perspective, had not yet resumed. Seok-jun tucked the real wristband into the waistband of his trunks, nestling it against the small of his back. His other hand already held the dummy. Kang had pressed the decoy into his palm during the hallway handshake. Same weight, same texture, same faint green glow. Seok-jun strapped the dummy to Jung's left forearm and clicked the clasp home in one smooth motion. The green indicator light came alive on the decoy's screen. It looked perfect. It transmitted nothing but an empty digital heartbeat. Seok-jun backpedaled across the canvas. He slid into his corner stool 6 feet from where he started and placed both hands on his knees. Time snapped. The roar returned like a physical shove to the chest. The arena lights swam back into focus. Jung's cornerman finished his sentence about extending combinations and never noticed the pause. Jung took a sip from the gel packet and tapped the wristband's screen twice. Nothing happened. A tiny green light glowed on the dummy's face, but no data populated, no combat analytics, no live threat vector readout. Jung tapped it again and his brow lowered. The champion's eyes found the corner clock, 26 seconds left. He shook the wristband once, a small, frustrated motion that did not belong on a man who had not lost a round in a decade. The device stayed dark. Jung's head snapped toward his corner, and his lips formed a question that died before it reached his tongue. His team was still elbow-deep in water bottles. They had not yet understood what was missing. Seok-jun watched from across the ring with the stillness of a man who had already solved the equation. The dead wristband on his own arm meant nothing now. Jung's sensor would not tell him that Seok-jun had dropped his left elbow 3 centimeters in the last 10 seconds. It would not flag a subtle weight shift toward the rear foot. It would not whisper the breath pattern of a man about to commit. For the first time in 10 years, Jung Do-yoon was fighting blind. The champion's jaw tightened. Seok-jun saw the tiny muscles along Jung's temple flex and release. The boy who had leaned on a machine since his debut was suddenly standing in a very quiet room. Jung's eyes swept the ring, as if the canvas itself might offer a clue. They landed on Seok-jun's face and stopped. Seok-jun did not smile. He simply looked back with the patient, empty expression of a man who had already paid the price for this moment. The crowd began to sense something. A ripple of uncertainty moved through the lower bowl. People leaning to check their betting screens. A few voices rising in confusion. The announcer's booth remained dark behind its glass. Kang Min-seok was watching all of it. Seok-jun knew because the small amber light had never pulsed again. That was the agreement. One signal, then silence until the interview. The clock bled down past 15 seconds. Jung ripped the Velcro strap of the dummy wristband and tried to reseat it against his glove. The green light never flickered. His lips curved into the first genuine snarl Seok-jun had seen from him all night. Champion was a boy again. A boy whose toy had broken right when he needed it most. Seok-jun let the moment land. He had spent the first round acting fragile, leaking openings, pretending to be a man with no plan. All of it had led here. The wristband was gone. The booth was blind, and he had 4 seconds left for the next round, but none left for the one just ending. The 60-second clock hit 0. The bell shrieked. Seok-jun rose from his stool, and Jung mirrored him a beat too slow, still staring at his dead screen. The referee's hand chopped down between them. Round 2. Jung's corner shouted something about keeping distance and working the jab. The champion flinched at the instruction. Clearly unused to being told what to do without his sensor already telling him why. Seok-jun stepped forward. His left glove was a fraction too low, the same posture he had used in the footage Jung's team bought. Same posture that the computer would have flagged as a prelude to a telegraphed overhand. Without the wristband, Jung had to read it himself. Seok-jun feinted with the overhand, and Jung bit hard, his right glove snapping upward to parry nothing. Seok-jun's left hook was already halfway around the exposed temple. The glove kissed Jung's headgear with a wet smack. Jung staggered 2 steps sideways, and the crowd inhaled as one lung. No one had touched the champion clean in 37 straight rounds. Seok-jun did not chase. He reset to the center of the ring and let Jung feel the unfamiliar weight of contact settling into his neck. The champion's face cycled through confusion and anger, and something else. Something that looked a great deal like fear. His eyes kept darting to the green light on his forearm. Seok-jun pressed the advantage, and the wristband gave Jung nothing in return. It was just a piece of plastic now, counting phantom steps toward a victory that no longer had data to stand on. The round wore on, and Jung fell deeper into the silence of his own broken tools. Seok-jun finally allowed the smile. It was small and cold, and it pushed across his mouth like the shadow of a closing door. Kang Min-seok's favor was a deferred debt, a live microphone waiting in the dark booth above the ring. The interview would come, and when it came, every screen broadcasting the 10-year unbeaten champion's quiet panic would carry the truth. But first, Seok-jun needed to finish the round. Equal footing was finally under his soles. The timer sang its flat electronic finish. Jung Do-yoon's gloves dropped to his thighs. He stood in the blue corner with a map that had turned to blank paper. His corner crew thrust a tablet at his face and got no response. Seok-jun straightened against the ropes. The pain in his left side was a hot, wet stone. He let it sit there. A long, transparent wire lowered a microphone from the booth. The red light above the lens woke up. 40,000 people leaned into the pause between rounds. Seok-jun flexed the muscle behind his left eye. The world froze into a block of amber. 40,000 faces locked on a held breath. Sound became a solid wall. 10 seconds. Count dropped through a deep chamber of his mind. He stepped out of his corner through the stopped air. The announcer's lips were parted around a silent syllable. Seok-jun walked around the referee's blank stare. He stopped beside the announcer's shoulder. The microphone hung an inch from the man's frozen fingers. 9 seconds burned away. Seok-jun slipped a slim drive from the seam of his glove. The drive's edge was cool. The moment cracked. Sound flooded the dome like a river tearing through a dam. Seok-jun's hand closed over the microphone first. The announcer flinched back with a choked noise. Seok-jun pulled the drive across the booth's reader slot. Every screen in the Titan Dome flickered once. The crowd's murmur cut in half. Jung Do-yoon was still staring at his dead tablet. Seok-jun brought the microphone to his lips. A photograph of a medical cooler filled the arena's displays. The cooler sat in the trunk of a black sedan, with a Hanul broadcasting stamp on the timecode. The reporter's terms surfaced in his memory like a blade pulled clean. Na Hae-jin had offered the exclusive in exchange for burying the footage of his frozen heartbeat. He had agreed without blinking. Now the exclusive was a loaded gun. Seok-jun spoke into the silence of the dome. He told 40,000 listeners that the 10-year unbeaten record was a lie. He said the record was built on synthetic hematocrit boosters. He said the champion's hands were steady because of a beta receptor agonist. The documents rolled across the screens behind him. Jung Do-yoon's head came up slowly. The blood drained from his face in a visible wave. His pupils shrank to dark pinpricks. The crowd became a storm of separate screams. A security guard in an orange vest vaulted the barrier. Jung's coach knocked over a stool trying to reach the ring stairs. Seok-jun did not move. The drive continued its work. Serum panels and pharmacy logs painted the air above the ring. The records named a clinic in Incheon. Records named a doctor who had been struck from the registry. The records named the precise cycle dates. 40,000 phones rose to capture the evidence. In the black VIP box, a man in a gray suit snapped a fountain pen in half. Seok-jun let the microphone pick up the sound of Jung's own breathing. The sound was thin and ragged. Jung's mouth opened and closed around nothing. The champion of a decade looked at the documents and looked at the floor. The crowd's roar shifted. Joy turned to fury. A drink cup arced from the mezzanine and exploded against the railing. Arena officials in pale blue jackets rushed the ring. The head commissioner climbed the steps with a handheld terminal. The terminal displayed an immediate testing order. Seok-jun set the microphone back in its cradle. He walked to the red corner and sat down on the stool. His rib gave a deep, grateful throb. The test team swarmed Jung's corner with sterile gloves and labeled sample cups. The referee held up both hands and declared the bout suspended. Screens went black for 3 long seconds. When they came back, the broadcast had switched to a league seal and a scrolling feed of rulebook citations. Seok-jun pulled a towel over his shoulders. He watched Jung being led toward the anti-doping station with a medic on either arm. The champion's legs moved like they belonged to someone else. The Hanul Broadcasting logo flickered once more at the corner of the dead displays. Seok-jun allowed himself a shallow breath. He remembered the reporter's cold smile. She had handed over the files in a coffee shop where the windows were covered with old newspapers. She had said, "Bury the story." He had buried it beneath a trade that looked like surrender. Now the story was a lens focusing every camera on Jung's hollow chest. Seok-jun's heart beat steady and slow. The 10 seconds he had burned in the stopped world still buzzed in his fingers. It was always 10 seconds. Always 10 years ago, the crash had opened that frozen pocket inside him. The crash that killed his old life and planted the power like a clockwork seed. He never forgot the numbers. 10 seconds. 10 years of Jung's false legend. The league's lab team wheeled a refrigerated container to the floor. The commissioner raised a sealed test kit for the cameras. A junior official printed a label with Jung's ring ID and pressed it to a glass vial. The sound of the printhead was as loud as a gavel. Seok-jun let his head fall back against the corner post. The ache in his ribs dulled to a promise of healing. He had bought himself a suspension. He had bought himself a window of recovery. He had bought the truth and stapled it to the sky of the dome. Jung was standing behind a privacy screen now. A medic tied a tourniquet around his arm. The champion's sleeve was rolled up to reveal a neat stripe of track marks. The camera operator in booth 3 zoomed in without waiting for permission. The footage ran raw on the auxiliary feed. Seok-jun saw it on the nearest monitor and did not smile. He simply closed his eyes and counted the seconds until the test result locked the future in place. The commissioner's voice carried through the public address. He announced that the test would be expedited. He announced that the fight would not resume. He announced that the league's full investigative panel would convene within the hour. The crowd answered with a noise that was half rage and half vindication. Seok-jun felt the vibration of it through the steel stairs. His chest rose under the towel. The drive was still in the booth reader. A league technician carefully removed it with gloved hands and sealed it in a tamper-proof bag. The bag went into a black case. The case went into the commissioner's custody. Seok-jun watched the chain of evidence through half-lidded eyes. He had satisfied the deal. The reporter's name was nowhere on the screen. Her voice was nowhere in the air. The story of his frozen heartbeat stayed buried. His payment was the chaos unfolding below the blue corner. Jung's face was still white. The medic pressed gauze to the crook of his elbow. Champion did not even wince. Seok-jun stood up slowly. His ribs protested in a language of sharp syllables. He walked to the edge of the ring and looked down at the commissioner. The commissioner did not meet his eyes. The official merely took the sealed case and descended the stairs with a guard at each side. The crowd parted around them like water around a blade. Seok-jun turned back to the ring. The announcer had not moved from the booth. His microphone was gone from its clamp. He stared at the empty space where the drive had been. His lips formed a silent question. Seok-jun answered with a single step toward the ropes. He raised one glove to the dome. The gesture was not a victory salute. It was a receipt. The Hanul Broadcasting logo faded from the dead screens. A new graphic illuminated the center display. The graphic was a simple white clock face with a red second hand. The hand swept around once. Then the clock vanished, and the league emblem returned. Seok-jun understood the message. The clock was not for the crowd. It was for him. It was a reminder that the 10 seconds he had stolen would be tallied somewhere. He let his glove fall. A corridor of security staff cleared a path to the anti-doping station. A nurse handed Jung a bottle of water. The champion took it with trembling fingers. The water bottle was clear plastic, and the label had been removed. Jung stared at it like it was a foreign object. Seok-jun watched the first drop of water spill over the champion's lip. He turned away from the sight. His own body was stitching its damage in the quiet. The power that had frozen the world for 10 seconds also wound his flesh a little faster. Not enough to be called healing. Enough to make the next round possible if the fight had continued. Now there was no next round. There was only the lab and the waiting. The crowd was filing out in a confused surge. The lower bowl lights dimmed to a housekeeping glow. Seok-jun stepped down from the apron. His feet hit the concrete floor with a sound like a comma. He walked toward the red tunnel without a trainer beside him. A young league intern stood at the tunnel mouth with a tablet. The intern asked him to wait for the commission's debrief. Seok-jun did not slow his pace. He simply told the intern that the debrief would find him. The tunnel swallowed him in its red light. The sound of the dome shrank to a distant roar behind the soundproofing. Seok-jun stopped in the first empty locker bay. He pressed his forehead to the cool metal. The reporter's deal was a closed loop, an exclusive handed over in a dim coffee shop. A story buried so deep that no search algorithm would ever surface it. A champion's 10-year record reduced to dirty blood. All of it paid now. All of it on screen. He pushed off the locker and walked deeper. The next chapter was already writing itself in the commissioner's sealed case. A synthetic EPO reading was a lock. An anabolic metabolite panel was already scheduled. The beta receptor agonist would show up as plain as daylight. Seok-jun knew the test would catch everything. Na-hae-jin's files had not missed a single dose. He rounded a corner and saw a wall screen still running the auxiliary feed. The screen showed Jung-do Yoon kneeling beside the sample station. The champion's face was a blank mask. His lips moved in words that the microphone did not catch. A medic knelt beside him with a cool cloth. The feed cut to the league seal. Seok-jun turned from the screen. The ache in his ribs was now a distant throb. The stolen 10 seconds were gone. The debt to the reporter was stamped with a paid mark. The story that lived was the one he had chosen. He pulled open the fire door to the parking level. Cold air rolled into the stairwell. The concrete steps went up and down in a gray spiral. He took the stairs one at a time, counting his breath. The numbers were steady. The numbers were his. The league would finish its work without him now. He had done his part. He had turned the exclusive into an evidence chain, and the evidence into a broadcast. The hero's action was no longer a swing of the fist. It was the hand that had plugged the drive into the reader. It was the voice that had told 40,000 people the truth. It was the silence that followed. Seok-jun stepped out into the parking structure. The distant sound of sirens rose from the street level. The lab team would be sealing the samples now. The commissioner would be preparing a statement. The world would wake tomorrow to a champion struck from the rankings. And the young man who had stopped time for 10 seconds would still be standing. The fire door closed behind him. Its slam was a period. The commissioner steps back to the podium. His shoes echo on the steel grate. He holds the printed lab report high enough for the cameras to catch it. The Titan Dome goes dead quiet. 40,000 people, and not one of them breathes. The commissioner reads the confirmed findings into the microphone. Synthetic EPO at 3 times the legal threshold. Anabolic metabolites consistent with a 7-week cycling protocol. Beta receptor agonist designed to suppress tremor response and enhance reaction speed. All banned. All present. All undeniable. The commissioner announces that Jung-do Yoon is disqualified from the Grand Zenith Championship. Effective immediately. The words hang in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Somewhere in the upper bowl, a fan starts clapping. It spreads. The applause becomes a roar. Not for Seok-jun, not yet, but for the execution of justice. Or the spectacle of it. Same thing in this building. Seok-jun watches from his corner. The towel hangs loose around his neck. The eyebrow drip has finally stopped. His rib still throbs with every heartbeat. He doesn't smile. He doesn't raise his arms. He just watches. Siwoo leans close and mutters that the USB wasn't even needed. The papers did the job. Seok-jun asks whether the fight continues. Siwoo's face tightens. He says the rules are unclear when a finalist is disqualified mid-match. But before he can finish, the commissioner raises his hand again. The crowd quiets. He has more to say. The commissioner states that the doping finding triggers an automatic investigation, and as part of that investigation, all recorded anomalies in this tournament will be reviewed. Every fighter's footage, every timing irregularity, every frame where physics didn't quite add up. The cameras cut to Seokjun's face on the giant overhead screens. His expression doesn't change, but Siwoo's knuckles go white on the ring apron. Here it comes. The commissioner says that includes Gong Seokjun's match footage. Seokjun is requested, voluntarily, the commissioner stresses, to submit to an interview with the tournament's integrity committee to explain his technique, his timing, his phantom step. The word voluntary lands with all the subtlety of a brick through glass. Everyone in the dome knows what it really means. Siwoo is already moving. He steps toward the commissioner's podium, waving his tablet. He shouts that this is out of order. He demands to know whether a cleared fighter who just exposed a cheater is now being investigated himself. The commissioner doesn't flinch. He says it is a procedural request. Siwoo fires back that it's a procedural trap. He points out that the committee already cleared Seokjun with a full medical exam. Blood work, nerve conduction, the works. The forged CHNP report did its job. Now they want to crack him open again. The crowd is split. Some are cheering Siwoo for standing up to the suit. Others are muttering, remembering the weird wins, the impossible dodges, the fighter who never gets hit clean. The commissioner tries to speak again. Siwoo cuts him off. He says the committee can review footage all at once. But an interrogation outside of a formal charge is harassment, and he'll file a countersuit for defamation before the sun comes up. The commissioner's jaw tightens. He glances off stage. Someone in a dark suit nods. The commissioner backs down on the word interrogation. He revises it to informal conversation. Siwoo practically barks a laugh. Seokjun raises one hand. Siwoo goes quiet. Everyone goes quiet. The Phantom finally speaks. He says he will answer the committee's questions. Siwoo's head whips around. His mouth opens to protest. Seokjun doesn't let him. He says he will do it. After the fight, the commissioner blinks. He asks what fight. Jung Do-yoon is disqualified. The tournament is over. Seokjun shakes his head. He says the fight is not over because it was never about Jung. He entered this tournament 10 years ago to honor a promise. That promise isn't fulfilled by a committee ruling. It's fulfilled in the ring, with his fists, against whoever stands across from him when the bell rings. The dome rumbles. This is the Phantom they paid to see. Not a bureaucrat. Not a victim. A fighter. The commissioner confers with the officials at the timekeeper's table. Huddled whispers. Frantic gestures. Someone pulls up the tournament rulebook on a tablet. Pages are scrolled. Paragraphs are highlighted. The head referee joins the huddle. Then Na Hye-jin. The arena manager hasn't said a word all night. She's been watching from the VIP box, arms crossed, face unreadable. Now she descends the steps. She walks with the calm of someone who owns every room she enters. She reaches the huddle. She doesn't lean in. She just states a fact. The tournament regulations allow for a substitute finalist in the event of disqualification. The fighter who lost the semifinal, An Jae-won, is medically cleared and waiting in the warm-up bay. The commissioner points out that An already lost to Seokjun. Na Hye-jin nods. She says that's true, but the rules don't specify that the substitute must be a fresh opponent. They only specify that the bracket must be filled. And right now, the bracket has a hole. An Jae-won is the next eligible fighter. The commissioner looks like he swallowed a lemon. He doesn't want this. The suits don't want this. They wanted a clean disqualification and a press conference. They wanted Seokjun answering questions under oath, in a closed room, with no cameras and no crowd. Not this. Not the Phantom demanding to fight again with a cracked rib and one good eye. But the crowd is behind him. And the crowd pays the bills. The commissioner raises the microphone. His voice is strained. He announces that the Grand Zenith Championship final will resume in 48 hours. Gong Seokjun versus An Jae-won. For the title, the dome explodes. The noise is physical. It vibrates through the steel grate and up Seokjun's legs and into the fissure in his 7th rib. He doesn't wince. He just nods once. Siwoo grabs his arm and steers him toward the medical bay. He's talking fast. Too fast. His words tripping over each other. He says the 48 hours is a gift and a curse. A gift because the rib needs every minute. A curse because the committee will spend every one of those minutes building their case. They'll find the forum posts. They'll find the fake CHNP report. They'll find the blindfolded exhibition and the pulse timing cover story. and every lie they've told since this tournament began. Seok-jun doesn't answer. He just walks. The tunnel is cold. The lights are fluorescent and harsh. A medic appears with a wheelchair. Seok-jun waves it off. He walks under his own power. Si-woo keeps talking. He says Na-hae-jin bought them time with the substitute fighter gambit. But she didn't do it out of charity. She wants the interview more than ever now. A fighter who exposes a cheat and then demands to finish the match? That's a 2-hour special. That's ratings gold. That's her retirement fund. Seok-jun asks whether the interview will happen before or after the committee's interrogation. Si-woo doesn't have an answer. Medical bay is quiet. The same cot. The same portable ultrasound. The same cold compress waiting on the steel tray. The medic, the same one from before, presses the ultrasound wand to Seok-jun's ribs. The screen shows the fissure. Still there. Still hairline thin. Still a wrong move away from becoming a full fracture. The medic says the 48 hours isn't enough. He recommends withdrawing. Seok-jun says he'll fight. The medic sighs. He says he expected that answer. He straps the cold compress tighter and tells Seok-jun to stay horizontal for the next 12 hours. No movement, no training, no shadow boxing in his head. Seok-jun lies back. The ceiling is white acoustic tile. He stares at it. Si-woo pulls up a chair. He opens his tablet. He says An Jae-won is a psychic fighter who can sense temporal gaps. They already beat him once, but that fight cost them a bruised rib, a time-stop reveal, and nearly a knockout loss. And An has been watching, studying. He knows the wristband trick now. He knows the dead man switch. He knows every tool Jung used, and he'll have his own countermeasures. Si-woo pulls up footage from An's earlier fights. He starts narrating patterns, movement tells, rhythm breaks. The thing An does with his left shoulder half a second before he commits to a kick. Seok-jun listens with his eyes closed. He's not sleeping. He's filing every word. The medbay door opens. Na-hae-jin steps inside. She closes the door behind her. She doesn't sit. She just leans against the wall and folds her arms. She says the committee moved faster than expected. They've already filed a formal inquiry. The interview is now mandatory. Not voluntary, not informal. Mandatory. Si-woo asks what changed. Na-hae-jin says Jung Do-yoon talked. From the holding room, after the blood test. Before the security guards took his phone. He told the officials that Gong Seok-jun can stop time. Si-woo's face goes pale. He asks whether anyone believed him. Na-hae-jin tilts her head. She says the committee didn't believe it, but they didn't dismiss it either. Because Jung had 2 years of anomaly footage on a secure server, and he gave them the password. Si-woo swears. Na-hae-jin ignores him. She looks directly at Seok-jun. She says the footage is damning. Not conclusive enough to prove time manipulation, but enough to raise questions. Enough to justify an inquiry. Enough to strip his title if he doesn't provide a satisfactory explanation. Seok-jun opens his eyes. He asks whether An Jae-won knows. Na-hae-jin says no. The footage hasn't leaked. The committee is keeping it sealed until the final is over. But after the final, the floodgates open. Si-woo runs both hands through his hair. He says they need a new story. Something better than CHNP. Something that explains the footage without revealing the truth. Na-hae-jin says that's his job. She turns to leave. At the door, she pauses. She says one more thing. Jung Do-yoon's sister, Sua, was moved from St. Helena's care facility 2 hours after the blood test. By private ambulance. No forwarding address. No contact number. Jung didn't request the transfer. Someone else did. Someone with money and connections and a reason to keep Jung's leverage alive. She doesn't say who. She doesn't have to. The door clicks shut behind her. Si-woo stares at the tablet. He whispers that the footage isn't the only threat now. Jung's sister is out there somewhere, and whoever has her has 2 years of anomaly recordings and a scientist's grudge against the Phantom. Seok-jun closes his eyes again. He says 48 hours. First An Jae-won, then the committee, then whatever comes after. One fight at a time. Si-woo doesn't look reassured, but he opens the tablet and starts typing. New cover stories. New contingencies. New lies to protect an old truth. The ceiling light buzzes. Compress hums cold against Seok-jun's ribs, and somewhere outside the Titan Dome, an ambulance carries a paralyzed woman into the dark, toward a man who still has everything to lose. The medbay lights stay dim. Seok-jun does not move for the first hour. His back presses flat against the cot, the cold compress humming its low electric rhythm across his ribs. Every breath is a negotiation, with the hairline crack in his 7th bone. Si-woo's tablet glows in the corner. his fingers tapping out contingencies and counter-narratives for a committee that now holds 2 years of anomaly. Footage. The ceiling tiles are perforated white squares. Seok-jun counts them. He counts the tiny holes in each tile, then multiplies by the number of tiles, then divides by the seconds of his dead time stop. The math doesn't help. The memory does. He closes his eyes and lets the fluorescent light bleed through his lids into a warm orange glow. The orange becomes sunlight through cherry blossoms. 10 years ago, a park bench, a breeze, his sister's voice telling him he would be great one day. He'd laughed at her then. She'd punched his shoulder and said she meant it. The memory sharpens into the hospital room after the crash. White sheets, white walls. The smell of antiseptic and burnt rubber still in his nostrils. His body unmarked. Impossibly, cruelly unmarked. While somewhere down the hall, his sister's body was already in the morgue. He remembers staring at his own hands. 10 seconds had passed between her shove and the fireball. 10 seconds he could not account for. 10 seconds that felt like a century. He blinked, and the wall clock had not moved. Nurse dropped a steel tray in the corridor, and the sound froze mid-clang. A single suspended note in dead air. Then the clock ticked, and the tray crashed, and Seok-jun understood that something inside him had cracked open. The ability was not a gift. It was a loan. His sister had bought him 10 seconds with her life. And now those 10 seconds came back to him once per fight. The promise he made to her grave was simple. Never lose. Never waste what she gave him. He has kept that promise for 10 years. His eyes open. The medbay ceiling is still perforated tile and fluorescent tubes. Siwoo is watching him. The kid says nothing, just holds up the tablet with a single line of text. Still believe you can beat On without the time stop? Seok-jun does not answer. He swings his legs off the cot. Compress shifts, the cold biting deeper into his skin. He stands. The medic from before appears in the doorway, arms folded, face unimpressed. He says the 12 hours aren't up. He says the committee could disqualify him if he aggravates the injury. He says a lot of things that Seok-jun does not hear. The fighter walks past him. The tunnel outside the medbay is the same cold fluorescent corridor, the same harsh white light bouncing off gray concrete. His bare feet are silent on the floor. Siwoo jogs to catch up, tablet clutched to his chest, hair a mess. He says they have 48 hours until the final. He says Jung Do-yoon's sister is still missing. He says Na Hae-jin's interview is now a committee interrogation with cameras and lawyers and a panel of 5 officials who want blood. He asks where they're going. Seok-jun turns left into a supply closet. The room is small, 10 feet by 10 feet. Mops in a bucket, shelves of bleach and floor wax, a single bulb dangling from a frayed cord. The air smells like ammonia and old sweat. He's used to this place. He's been here before, years ago, when the dome was just a local gym, and his streak was still in single digits. The closet was his meditation room back then. Nobody ever looked for a champion in a janitor's closet. He sits cross-legged on the concrete floor. The cold seeps through his thin pants. He places his hands on his knees. Siwoo stands in the doorway, uncertain. He doesn't know whether to speak or to leave. Seok-jun tells him to stay. He tells him to listen, because this is the only time he'll ever say it. The kid goes still. Seok-jun speaks slowly. He says the time stop is not a weapon. It was never a weapon. It is a remnant of the worst night of his life, wrapped in 10 seconds of borrowed stillness. Every time he uses it, he feels the heat of an explosion that should have killed him. Every time he uses it, he hears his sister's voice. He says the committee can ask their questions. They can interview him for 2 hours or 20. He will not tell them the truth. But he will not lie to himself anymore either. The ability is not a cheat. It is a scar. And a scar doesn't make you invincible, just reminds you what you survived. Siwoo doesn't move. His tablet dangles at his side, screen dark. He looks like a kid who just watched a door open into a room he was never supposed to see. His breathing slows. The pain in his ribs sharpens with each inhale, then dulls to a steady ache, then becomes something distant. He focuses on it, not to escape it, to accept it. The hairline fissure is part of him now. So is the dead time stop. So is the footage in the committee's hands. So is the missing girl in a private ambulance. All of it is real. All of it is his to carry. The bulb above him buzzes. Dust motes drift through the yellow light. Siwoo slides down the doorframe and sits on the floor, knees pulled up to his chest. He doesn't open the tablet. He doesn't type anything. He just watches. The silence stretches. 5 minutes pass. Seok-jun's face does not change. His shoulders remain straight, his hands still on his knees, his spine a plumb line from crown to concrete. He is not sleeping. He is not drifting. He is staring at something behind his eyelids, a grave, a cherry tree, a girl who never got to see him fight. The promise circles back. Never lose. The promise does not say never feel pain. The promise does not say never face a committee or an analyst or a fighter who can read temporal gaps. The promise only says win. He opens his eyes when the door creaks wider. A maintenance worker stumbles back, startled to find two men sitting in his supply closet. Siwoo waves him off with a muttered apology. Seokjun rises. The moment is over. The meditation is done. But something in his posture has shifted. The exhaustion is still there. The rib still hurts. But his eyes are steady in a way they were not an hour ago. Siwoo notices. He falls into step beside Seokjun as they walk back toward the main corridor. The tablet stays dark in his hand. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't offer strategies. He just walks beside the champion and waits. The tunnel opens into the training annex. Heavy bags hang from chains. Speed bags rattle in their brackets. A sparring ring sits empty under a hooded light. The room is cold. Ventilation system hums somewhere in the ceiling. Siwoo finally speaks. He says Jung Do-yoon is disqualified but not neutralized. The analyst lost a fight, not a war. And if the final against An pushes Seokjun to the brink, if he empties his time stop and still takes damage, Jung will be watching, waiting. Siwoo pauses. He says Jung built 2 years of footage and a wristband that detects temporal anomalies. He built a dead man switch and a dart launcher, and a psychological profile of Seokjun's combat patterns. If the committee's investigation doesn't destroy the Phantom's career, Jung will find another way. And he has a paralyzed sister out there somewhere. A hostage to whoever financed that private ambulance. Siwoo says the word no one wants to say. Poison. If Yo gets desperate enough, he will escalate beyond performance enhancers and into something lethal. Neurotoxin on a blade. Contact poison on a glove. Something airborne that doesn't need to pierce skin. The analyst is a man who prepared for a decade. He is not going to stop because a committee disqualified him. Seokjun listens without breaking stride. He reaches the center of the training floor and stops. The heavy bag sways slightly, stirred by the ventilation. He asks Siwoo what kind of poison he's talking about. Siwoo rattles off names from Jung's pharmaceutical profile. Synthetic neurotoxins with delayed onset. Compounds that mimic exhaustion at first. Sluggish reflexes. Blurred vision. A heaviness in the limbs. Then cascade into full motor failure. He says Jung's beta receptor agonist suppresses tremor and speeds reaction time. If you can dose an opponent with a slow-acting compound and then neutralize their time stop, the fight ends before the second round. Seokjun turns to face him. He asks whether the poison would work inside the pause. Siwoo thinks about it. He says the poison is chemical, not temporal. If it enters the bloodstream before the freeze, it keeps working during the freeze. If it's administered outside the freeze, the 10 seconds buy nothing. Seokjun nods. He says he needs to learn how to dodge without the pause. Not just dodge. Move. Read attacks. Sense danger the way Ma Jin-hyuk does, with instinct instead of frozen time. Siwoo stares. He says Seokjun built his entire style around a 10-second window that no one else can see. Reworking that in 48 hours is insane. It's like asking a painter to learn sculpture the day before a gallery opening. Seokjun isn't listening anymore. He is already pulling on his gloves. The training floor is cold under his bare soles. The heavy bag sways. He steps into the sparring ring. The canvas is worn thin in the center, stained with the sweat of a decade's worth of fighters. He raises his fists. Siwoo hesitates. Then he picks up a training pad, slides it onto his arm, and steps across from Seokjun. The first drill is simple. Siwoo calls the direction of the strike and throws a padded punch. Left hook. Jab. Overhand right. Seokjun slips each one. The movements are clean. Then Siwoo stops calling the direction. He just swings. Left hook. Seokjun reads the shoulder rotation and slips right. The pad whooshes past his ear. Siwoo throws again without pausing. Straight right, body shot, shovel hook. Seokjun weaves, drops his elbow, pivots out of range. The rib protests every twist. A sharp spike of pain lances up his side when he rotates too fast. He does not slow down. Siwoo increases the speed. He throws combinations designed to overwhelm, not to teach. 5 punches in 3 seconds, all from different angles. Seokjun's feet move on their own. His body remembers patterns his conscious mind cannot name. The first 4 punches miss by inches. The 5th clips his shoulder. He grunts and resets. Siwoo stops, breathing hard, his face pale. He says Seokjun just dodged 12 consecutive strikes without the time stop. He says that's not human reaction time. Seok-jun shakes his head. He says it's not reaction at all. It's anticipation. The same instinct Ma Jin-hyuk trained over a lifetime of brawling. He just never let himself feel it before because the time stop made it unnecessary. The crutch is gone now. The leg has to learn to walk. They drill for another hour. The ventilation hums. The heavy bags sway. Sweat drips from Seok-jun's chin onto the canvas. His rib sends pain signals with every sharp intake. But he does not favor the injury. Favoring it would teach his body to flinch. Flinching in a real fight gets him poisoned. Si-woo calls for a break. He demands another round. Si-woo says the medic will strap him to the cot if he tears the fissure into a full fracture. Seok-jun keeps his hands up. Si-woo sighs. He attacks again. This time, he adds feints. He shows a left hook, then pulls it into a body cross. He shows a jab, then drops low for a leg sweep. Seok-jun reads the weight shifts. A feint loads the rear foot differently than a real strike. A leg sweep starts with a hip drop half a second before the foot moves. He sees the tells and reacts without thinking. Leg sweep misses by a full 6 inches. Seok-jun steps over it and counters with a light tap to Si-woo's temple. A tap only, no force behind it. Just proof of position. Si-woo stumbles back, eyes wide. He lowers the pad. He says Seok-jun just countered a leg sweep while injured and exhausted and running on no sleep. He asks whether the time stop was even the main weapon all along. Seok-jun doesn't answer. He walks to the edge of the ring and picks up a water bottle. The water is lukewarm and tastes like plastic. He drinks half and pours the rest over his head. The cold shocks his system awake. His reflection in the polished floor shows a man with a taped ribcage, a split left eyebrow still crusted with dried blood, and eyes that haven't softened in a decade. He looks at that reflection and makes a decision. The time stop is his sister's gift. He has used it as a sword for 10 years. He has won 97 fights because he could freeze the world and rewrite the last 3 seconds of any exchange. The sword has become a target. Jung built a wristband to detect it. An can sense the temporal gaps it leaves. The committee now has footage of every time he ever used it. The sword is not just a weapon anymore. It is a trail of evidence leading straight to the truth he swore never to reveal. He turns back to Si-woo. He says he's made a choice. In the final against An Jae-won, he will not attack with the time stop. He will not reposition debris. He will not set traps. He will not land a single punch during the frozen seconds. Si-woo looks like he's been slapped. He asks what the point of the ability is if Seok-jun won't use it. Seok-jun answers without hesitation. Defense. If An throws a strike that would kill him, he pauses. He moves. He survives. But nothing more. 10 seconds of pure preservation. No offense, no repositioning for a counter. Just survival. Si-woo processes this. His mouth opens and closes twice. He says the final is in 48 hours against a psychic who can already sense temporal gaps and punch Seok-jun inside the freeze. Now Seok-jun wants to fight that man with one hand tied behind his back. Seok-jun says he wants to fight him with both hands, but the pause was never the point. The pause saved his life the night of the crash. The pause let him walk away while his sister burned. Using it to hurt people was always a corruption of what she gave him. If he's going to keep his promise, never lose, never waste what she gave him, he has to find another way. The words hang in the cold air. Si-woo doesn't argue. He knows that tone. It's the same tone Seok-jun used when he told the medic he would fight with a hairline fracture. The same tone he used when he stared down Jung Do-yoon's wristband and said the word wrong. The champion has made up his mind. The strategist's job is to make the impossible plan work. Si-woo nods slowly. He picks up his tablet. His fingers start moving. New contingencies, new patterns, new drills for a fighter who has just voluntarily disarmed his greatest weapon. Training floor feels larger than before. The shadows in the corners seem deeper. Somewhere in Seoul, a private ambulance is parked in an underground garage, and a paralyzed woman lies in a bed she did not choose, watched over by a man with money and a grudge. Somewhere else, An Jae-won is studying the same footage the committee now holds, mapping every temporal gap in Seok-jun's 10-year career. The clock on the Titan Dome's outer wall reads 47 hours and 12 minutes until the final. Seok-jun puts his gloves back on and raises his fists. Si-woo attacks. The drill continues. The Titan Dome shakes. 48 hours have passed since the disqualification. The replacement final is set. An Jae-won waits in the blue corner already. His eyes stay half closed, like a man half asleep. But every fighter in the locker room knows the truth. That sleepy expression hides a radar that feels the shape of time itself. Seok-jun enters the tunnel with fresh tape wrapped around his 7th rib. The medic told him he's a fool. He walked past her anyway. Siwoo walks 2 steps behind, clutching a tablet that shows 0 new contingencies. The champion hasn't let him plan anything beyond basic footwork. No traps, no debris plays, no frozen second punches. Just a promise whispered to a gravestone 10 years ago. The crowd noise hits like a wall when they step through the curtain. Cameras swivel toward the blue corner and the red. The announcer bellows the names. An Jae-won, Gong Sok-jun, Phantom versus Psychic. 500,000 people watch live across 17 countries. Seok-jun doesn't look at the screens. He climbs through the ropes and plants his feet on the canvas. The same canvas where Jung Do-yoon's wristband still lies forgotten against the apron. The bell rings. An moves first. Not fast, just certain. His feet slide across the mat like he's reading a script only he can see. Sok-jun circles left, hands high, rib throbbing with every breath. The medic warned that the fissure could widen with a single bad impact. He doesn't favor it. Favoring it would tell An exactly where to aim. An throws a probing jab. Seok-jun slips it by 2 inches. The psychic nods. He says Seok-jun's reaction time is still sharp. He wonders whether the famous technique is already active. Seok-jun doesn't answer. He's not using the pause. Not yet. Not unless he has to. An fires a 3-punch combination. Left cross, right hook, spinning back fist. Seok-jun ducks the first, parries the second, and leans back from the third while feeling the wind pass his chin. An's hand stops an inch from his face. The crowd gasps. Seok-jun counters with a quick straight to the chest. It lands. An absorbs it without blinking. He smiles like a man who just confirmed a theory. The psychic resets. Seok-jun watches the man's shoulders. They're relaxed. Too relaxed. An isn't fighting with muscle memory. He's fighting with a 6th sense that tastes every millisecond of the fight. Siwoo warned about this. The psychic can feel the approach of a punch before the fist even clenches. He reads intent, not motion. An lunges. 4 strikes in the time it takes most men to throw one. Seok-jun blocks the first 2. The third slams into his guard and rattles his forearms. The fourth is a knee aimed at his ribcage. He twists. The knee grazes his side. Pain blooms under the tape. He stumbles back and hits the ropes. Think he can keep this up? Siwoo shouts from the corner. He tells Seok-jun to breathe, to keep his eyes on the psychic's lead hip. An's hip telegraphs the real strike. The arms lie. The shoulders lie. The hip never lies. Seok-jun nods. He pushes off the ropes and circles again. An's smile fades. He throws another combination. This time, Seok-jun watches the hip and the rear foot. The rear heel lifts before the crossfires. Hip rotates half an inch before the hook. He reads every beat. He slips the cross by a hair. He ducks the hook and fires a body shot under An's ribs. It lands clean. An grunts. The psychic's calm cracks for the first time. An backs up. He asks if this is the famous phantom step. He says it feels different. Less like time distortion. More like Seok-jun is just faster than a human should be. Seok-jun doesn't reply. He's not faster. He's just watching. An's eyes narrow. He changes stance. Now his lead hand drops. His chin lifts an inch. An invitation. Seok-jun doesn't bite. He's seen that trap in 100 underground fights. A dangling target always hides a counter. An realizes the bait won't work. He sighs. He says they can finish this the hard way then. He shifts his weight and explodes forward. 7 strikes in a blur. Elbow, knee, hook, cross, shovel, head kick. Seok-jun reads them all. But the 7th strike is a feint. An's hip doesn't rotate. The foot doesn't lift. The attack vanishes mid-motion, and a real strike comes from the other side. A straight right aimed at Seok-jun's left temple. There's no time to dodge. Seok-jun's hand twitches. The world freezes. The roar of the crowd dies. The blinking lights on the giant screens stop mid-flash. An's fist hangs 2 inches from Seok-jun's skull, motionless. A bronze statue with murderous intent. Seok-jun takes a breath. He promised only defense. He counts the seconds. 1 Mississippi. He steps sideways, moving his head clear of the frozen punch. 2 Mississippi. He repositions his feet so he can counter after the resume. He doesn't throw a strike. He just moves. 3 Mississippi. He plants his back foot. 4 Mississippi. He lets the world restart. Time rushes back. An's fist passes through empty air. His own momentum carries him forward. Seok-jun, already repositioned, taps An's temple with an open palm. No knockout. Just proof. Proof that the psychic's kill shot missed by a mile.
An freezes.
Not from time manipulation, from shock. He felt it. He felt the gap.
A tiny hole in the flow of the universe.
Exactly 1 foot to his left. Seokjun was there a split second ago. Now he's here.
An turns his head slowly.
He asks how long the pause lasts. He says he can feel the edges of it like a missing tooth. Seokjun doesn't answer.
He resets his stance.
The crowd buzzes with confusion. They saw An throw a perfect punch and miss nothing. They can't explain it.
Committee's cameras are definitely rolling.
An's expression hardens. He's not impressed. He's calculating. He says the anomaly left a marker.
A tiny temporal residue.
He can sense it now. Every time Seokjun uses the pause, he'll know exactly where it started and where it ended.
Seokjun's jaw tightens.
That's bad. But he only needs one more survival window. The fight continues. An's attacks become sharper.
He throws with the confidence of a man who can see the future.
Seokjun dodges and blocks. His rib screams with every pivot.
A bead of sweat rolls down his forehead and stings the split in his eyebrow.
The cut reopens. Blood trickles into his vision.
He wipes it with his forearm.
An sees the blood. He says the champion is running on fumes.
He asks if the famous Gong Seokjun will lose because he chose not to cheat.
Those words hit harder than any punch. Seokjun's hands clench.
Not cheat.
Survive. That's the only rule. An presses the advantage. He launches a brutal knee aimed at the damaged rib.
Seokjun twists, but too slow.
The knee connects with his guard, driving his own arm into his side. The hairline fissure widens.
He feels the grind of bone.
He doesn't scream. He grunts once and stumbles into the ropes. The medic rises from her seat. Siwoo's face goes white.
He yells at Seokjun to end it now,
To use whatever he has. He pushes off the ropes and stands. He raises his fist.
An watches with something almost like respect.
The psychic decides to finish it. He charges. A straight right, a left hook, a spinning elbow.
Seokjun reads the hip.
The spin starts with the rear foot lifting. The elbow will follow the shoulder rotation.
He ducks under the elbow
and drives a body shot into An's floating rib. An folds. For half a second, his eyes widen.
Seokjun reads the opening
and fires an uppercut to the chin. He doesn't use the pause. He doesn't freeze time. He just punches.
An's head snaps back.
The psychic collapses onto the canvas, unconscious before he lands. The bell rings. The referee counts. An doesn't move.
Match is over.
Gong Seokjun wins by knockout at 2 minutes 12 seconds of round 1. The crowd erupts. Seokjun doesn't celebrate.
He leans against the turnbuckle
and presses a hand to his rib. The medic rushes through the ropes.
Siwoo climbs in behind her,
already arguing with a ringside official about the mandatory interview. The commissioner's voice booms over the speakers.
He congratulates the champion.
Then he reminds everyone that Seokjun agreed to a full interview regarding his fighting technique.
The anomaly footage will be reviewed.
The interview begins in 1 hour. Cameras all over the globe will carry it live. Seokjun closes his eyes.
His fist is still clenched against his side.
He thinks about cherry blossoms, about a voice that told him to run,
about a promise he made in a hospital bed 10 years ago.
He opens his eyes and nods at Siwoo. Let's get it over with.
1 hour later,
Seokjun sits in a small room beneath the Titan Dome. 3 cameras point at his face.
Na Hae-jin sits across from him,
professional and cold. She says this will be brief. She asks him to explain the so-called phantom step.
Seokjun speaks slowly.
He talks about timing, about reading the opponent's weight shifts, about the tiniest signals in the hips and feet.
He says there's no magic,
just 10 years of fighting. Na Hae-jin raises an eyebrow. She asks about the freeze frame footage from earlier matches,
one where he seems to teleport.
Seokjun says the footage is doctored.
He points out that Jung Do-yoon,
the disqualified analyst, admitted to using performance-enhancing drugs and falsifying evidence.
He asks whether the committee trusts a man who doped and lied.
Na Hae-jin doesn't flinch.
She says the footage was examined by independent experts,
including the timestamp data. It shows a clean 10-second gap. Seokjun leans forward.
He asks whether anyone can see him moving in that gap.
Na Hae-jin pauses. No one can see him move. The gap is empty.
He says that doesn't prove he could act during it.
Maybe the camera malfunctioned. Maybe Jung planted the anomaly.
With the analyst's reputation in tatters,
that doubt is heavy enough. The room falls silent. The committee members behind the cameras mutter.
Na Hae-jin taps her pen.
She says they'll recess and deliberate. But one thing is clear. Without solid proof of cheating, Gong Seok-jun remains the champion. Seok-jun stands. He bows once. Then he walks out of the room and into the corridor where Si-woo waits. The young strategist hands him a cold water bottle. He says the media is already spinning the story as a technical victory over a psychic who couldn't read a man without magic. Seok-jun drinks. He says nothing. They walk past the medical bay, past the locker rooms, past the spot where Kang Min-suk once handed him a burner phone. They exit the Titan Dome into a dark Seoul night. The moon hangs low. Seok-jun stops. He looks back at the massive dome. Tells Si-woo that the interview bought them maybe 6 months. Si-woo asks what happens after. Seok-jun says they'll fight again, and again, as long as he's breathing. Because his sister's gift isn't a trick to be exposed. It's a promise he'll keep until the day he joins her. The numbness creeps up from the graze on his forearm like ice water through veins. Seok-jun feels his fingers go slack first. His right hand stops forming a proper fist. The crowd noise warps into a distant underwater hum. Jung Do-yoon watches from across the ring with the patience of a man who's already won. The analyst doesn't rush in. He just waits. The neurotoxin's doing the work for him. Seok-jun blinks hard, and the arena lights smear into long, yellow streaks. His legs feel like they're buried in wet concrete. Every breath comes shallower than the last. The rib fissure screams with each inhale. But even that pain is getting fuzzy around the edges. Si-woo's voice cuts through the fog from somewhere near the corner. He's screaming at Seok-jun to keep his hands up. The kid sounds terrified. Can't blame him. Jung takes one deliberate step forward, then another. His posture is completely relaxed now. The wristband on his left arm glows green. The dummy, costume jewelry with dead silicone guts. But it doesn't matter anymore. He doesn't need biometric data to read a dying man. Jung's lips move. The words don't carry over the crowd, but the meaning's clear enough. He's asking if this is how the undefeated phantom ends. On his knees, poisoned like vermin. Seok-jun's vision tunnels. The periphery goes black. Only Jung's face remains sharp in the center. Those spectacles, those cold eyes. A memory surfaces unbidden. Not the crash, not the hospital. Something smaller. A training session 3 days ago, when Si-woo had him drilling without the pause. The kid had pulled up anatomy diagrams on his tablet. Pressure points. Vagus nerve clusters. The exact spot where a precise strike interrupts autonomic function. Si-woo called it a last resort. If you're ever empty, the kid said, and you've got one shot left, hit here. He tapped a spot on the neck diagram, just below the jaw where the carotid splits. The vagus nerve sits right there, like a kill switch God forgot to hide. Seok-jun had nodded and filed it away. Now he's emptying his tank on a gamble. He can't feel his right hand. His left is barely better. Jung is walking into range. One more step. The analyst wants to gloat up close. He wants to watch the light leave Seok-jun's eyes, while there's still consciousness behind them. Big mistake. Seok-jun lets his body sag against the ropes. His chin drops to his chest. Total submission posture. The crowd thinks he's done. Si-woo thinks he's done. Even the medic is already climbing through the ropes. Jung leans in. His face is maybe 18 inches away, close enough to smell the antiseptic on his own gloves. Your sister died for nothing, Jung whispers. The venom in those words cuts through every layer of neurotoxin. Seok-jun's eyes snap up. He sees the exact spot Si-woo showed him on the diagram. The hollow beneath Jung's jaw, 2 inches below the earlobe, where the carotid artery pulses against the skin. He doesn't have a fist. His right hand won't close. But his knuckles don't need to form a fist to drive into soft tissue. He throws everything left in his body into a single lunge. His knuckles drive into Jung's neck like a spear. Impact runs up Seok-jun's arm and into his shoulder. Jung's eyes go wide. His mouth opens. No sound comes out. The vagus nerve overload sends a tsunami of contradictory signals crashing through his autonomic system. Heart rate plummets. Blood pressure drops off a cliff. The brain, suddenly starved of oxygen, hits the emergency shutdown. Jung Do-yoon's legs fold like wet paper. He crumples. The analyst who spent a decade perfecting a counter to frozen time collapses without ever seeing the blow that finished him. There's no time stop, no magic, just anatomy and a memory of a diagram on a tablet. The referee rushes in. He waves both arms over his head, the universal signal for a knockout. The bell rings. Gong Seok-jun wins by knockout. The crowd doesn't erupt. They don't understand what just happened. 1 second, the champion is dying on the ropes. The next, his opponent is a heap on the canvas. Seok-jun tries to raise his arm. It doesn't move. The numbness has climbed past his elbow, past his shoulder, into his chest. His diaphragm is losing the fight against paralysis. Each breath is a conscious decision now. The medic reaches him first. He rips open his glove and sees the graze on his forearm, a thin line already turning purple-black at the edges. Her face goes pale. She shouts for the anti-venom kit. No one has it. Jung didn't bring the antidote to the ring. Why would he? He never planned to lose. Siwoo vaults over the ropes and lands beside his fighter. His tablet clatters to the canvas and the screen cracks. He doesn't notice. He's pressing both hands against Seokjun's chest, feeling for a heartbeat. It's there. Weak, irregular, but there. He's trying to make sense of the chaos for the global audience. The champion is down. The challenger is unconscious. Medical staff are swarming the ring like ants on a dropped candy. Mission officials huddle near the timekeeper's table, arguing about protocols and liability. Na Hae-jin pushes through all of them. Her heels click across the canvas. She kneels beside Seok-jun and speaks directly into his ear. She tells him the cameras are still rolling. She tells him half the world is watching. She tells him if he dies on live broadcast, his secret won't matter. Nobody will remember the phantom step. They'll only remember the corpse. Seok-jun's lips move. No sound. Siwoo leans closer, his ear almost touching Seok-jun's mouth. Words are barely breath. He says the time stop wasn't the gift. His sister was the gift. He says he's sorry. The medic finally returns, breathless, coat flapping, clutching a white case with red lettering. She slams it open on the canvas. 3 syringes lay in foam cutouts. She grabs the first one and drives the needle into Seok-jun's neck. The plunger depresses. Clear fluid disappears into muscle. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 3 Mississippi. Seok-jun's chest continues its shallow rise and fall. Siwoo is counting breaths out loud. 4 Mississippi. 5 Mississippi. The purple-black discoloration at the wound site stops spreading. 6 Mississippi. 7 Mississippi. Seok-jun's right hand twitches. 8 Mississippi. His fingers curl into a weak fist on the canvas. 9 Mississippi. His eyes open. Bloodshot. Glassy, but open. 10 Mississippi. Antivenin binds the neurotoxin molecules, neutralizing them faster than they can degrade his motor functions. The medic exhales. Siwoo collapses onto his backside and stares at the cracked tablet as if it holds answers the universe doesn't. Na Hae-jin stands. She smooths her jacket and walks to the commissioner. Her voice carries through the sudden hush. She tells him the champion is stable. She tells him the match is over, and the footage is clean, and the record books will show a knockout victory in the final round. The commissioner opens his mouth to argue about investigation protocols. She cuts him off. She reminds him that his retirement bonus depends on a clean tournament. She reminds him that the doping scandal has already damaged the Titan Dome's reputation. She strongly suggests that no one wants to hear about poison darts or secret abilities or dead sisters. The commissioner closes his mouth. He nods. He walks to the announcer's podium and takes the microphone. His voice fills the arena. The official result stands. Gong Seok-jun remains the undefeated champion. The crowd finally finds its voice. The roar shakes the steel rafters. Seok-jun, still flat on his back, hears it through layers of exhaustion and chemical fog. His lips move one more time. Siwoo leans in. This time the words are clear. Seok-jun asks if the cameras caught the hand twitch. He asks if anyone saw him activate the pause. Siwoo smiles. A wet, exhausted, half-crazy smile. He tells Seok-jun there was no pause. He tells him he won with nothing but a diagram and a desperate lunge. He tells him the secret is still safe. The medics lift Seok-jun onto a stretcher. The cameras follow every jostle and sway as they carry him out of the ring and down the tunnel. Siwoo walks alongside, one hand resting on the stretcher rail. His knuckles are still white. They pass the spot where Kang Min-suk once stood with a burner phone. They pass the locker room where Daeho sneered about weird winds. They pass the door to the supply closet where Seok-jun sat cross-legged and told Siwoo the time stop was a scar, not a weapon. The exit looms ahead, a rectangle of cold white light. He's not thinking about the victory. He's not thinking about the neurotoxin, or the committee, or the global audience dissecting replay footage. He's thinking about cherry blossoms, about a voice under a tree telling him to run, about a promise he made in a narrow hospital bed 10 years ago. Never lose a fight. He just kept it. The arena lights dim to a faint amber glow. Seok-jun stands over a crumpled opponent whose arm bends at a wrong angle. Sweat and blood trail down his temple and drip onto the canvas.
The crowd noise drops to a low rumble of anticipation. A medic stretcher rolls toward the ring's edge. Park Dae-ho's last trick hangs in the air like smoke from a dead fire. A microneedle buried inside Dae-ho's mouthguard fires on a 5-second delay. The needle shoots a neurotoxin cloud directly into Seok-jun's face. Seok-jun's vision blurs at the edges. He did not see the needle in time. He did not feel the prick. His body processes the toxin faster than a normal fighter. The poison spreads toward his motor nerves. His legs tremble. Siwoo's voice cuts through the earpiece in a calm whisper. The young strategist repeats the plan from the supply closet. Use it only once. Wait until the absolute end. Seok-jun clenches his jaw. Dae-ho's final gambit was not the mouthguard dart. A secondary implant inside Dae-ho's shattered wrist splints clicks open. A thin metal filament unspools from the broken bone. The filament is coated with a contact sedative. It swings towards Seok-jun's ankle like a whip. The crowd cannot see the wire from the upper seats. Referee stands 2 meters back and misses the glint. Seok-jun feels the toxin numbing his left calf. The wire is a blur of motion. His response window measures less than half a second. Siwoo says nothing else on the earpiece. The strategist trusts the plan. Seok-jun triggers the time stop. The world freezes into a painting of motionless color. The wire hangs in the air 3 centimeters from his tendon. Referee is a statue mid-blink. The arena lights become solid gold pillars. Dust motes stop like distant stars. Seok-jun has exactly 10 seconds. 10 seconds chosen because the scar inside his left pupil throbs beyond that limit. The count begins in his head. He steps sideways off the deadened leg. His movement is a slow, deliberate drag. He watches the frozen wire and measures the arc. The implant's mechanism is a tiny, spring-loaded catch. He identifies the release point. He pivots behind Dae-ho's suspended body. His right hand catches the filament at the base. He unspools the wire from the implant with a surgeon's precision. The wire coils into his palm without breaking or triggering the sedative layer. He guides the filament back toward Dae-ho's own exposed wrist. He presses the release catch closed with his thumb. Time crashes forward. The wire retracts instantly into Dae-ho's bone. Contact sedative floods the opponent's bloodstream instead. Dae-ho's eyes roll back. He collapses face first into the canvas without a sound. The crowd erupts in confusion, and then wild cheers. The referee drops to one knee and checks Dae-ho's pulse. Seok-jun takes one step backward. The neurotoxin finally reaches his lungs. His vision doubles. The earpiece crackles with Siwoo's single exhale of relief. Medical teams flood the ring from 3 corners. A female doctor catches Seok-jun before his head hits the ropes. The announcer screams the official result into a microphone. The undefeated streak now stretches to 10 years and 1 more night. Baek Siwoo watches the scene from the stands with a hand over his mouth. The plan worked exactly once. At the very end, Scar remained hidden inside time's shadow. A stretcher carries Seok-jun through a flood of camera flashes. His eyes close somewhere inside the tunnel. He does not dream about the victory. He dreams about cherry blossoms and a voice under a tree. The hospital corridor is cold white tile under fluorescent lights. Nurses wheel Seok-jun into a locked ER bay. A toxicology screen beeps urgent numbers on a monitor. Thick leather restraints hold his wrists and ankles down. His skin glows a faint violet from the neurotoxin in his capillaries. A chief medic injects a green counteragent into his IV line. Siwoo stands outside the glass partition with pale knuckles. The medic reports that the poison is neutralized, but recovery may take hours. Seok-jun's vitals stabilize at 3 in the morning. The restraints are removed. He drifts in and out of shallow sleep. A night security guard stationed at the hallway door yawns into his phone. The reporter moves at 4 a.m. A woman in pale blue scrubs slips past the guard with a forged ID. She carries a small cardioid microphone inside her sleeve. The ER bay door clicks open softly. She crouches beside Seok-jun's bed in near total darkness. Her recording device is a pen clipped to her collar. Seok-jun's lips move against the pillow. The reporter leans in close enough to feel his breath. The words are faint but clear. Time stop. He murmurs the phrase twice. Then silence. The reporter's eyes widen with feral excitement. She backs away and disappears into the stairwell before sunrise. Not Hae-jin receives the alert at her office desk by 7 a.m. A loyal staffer intercepted a file-sharing ping from a freelance tabloid server. The attached audio clip is 10 seconds long and contains the murmured words. Na Hae-jin recognizes the voice instantly. He pulls security camera footage from the hospital. The fake scrub uniform is visible in 3 frames. The face matches a contract reporter named Yoon Yuri. Na Hae-jin makes a single cold phone call. Yoon Yuri arrives at a cafe near the Han River an hour later. The reporter wears a smirk and a pressed blouse. She slides a small memory card across the table. Na Hae-jin does not touch the card. She sets a thick envelope of cash next to an untouched coffee cup. The amount is high enough to buy a studio apartment in Gangnam. Na Hae-jin tells the reporter that the story dies here, and the footage never existed. She says nothing else. Her silence is heavier than any threat. Yoon Yuri pockets the envelope and leaves without a backward glance. Na Hae-jin pockets the memory card and burns it inside a metal waste building behind the ministry building. Smoke curls into a gray sky. She waits until the last ash vanishes. Then she walks to the hospital herself. The hospital room is quiet in the late afternoon. Seok-jun sits upright against two pillows. The violet color has faded from his skin. His eyes track Na Hae-jin the moment she steps inside. She sets a small paper bag on the side table. The bag contains the charred remains of the memory card. Seok-jun looks at the ashes and then at her face. Na Hae-jin tells him that a reporter caught him talking in his sleep. She says the words were time stop. Seok-jun's pulse ticks upward on the monitor behind him. Na Hae-jin says the footage is gone and the reporter is handled. She adds that she owes him a debt from something long ago. Seok-jun does not ask what debt. He simply watches her with steady, exhausted eyes. Na Hae-jin turns toward the window. He speaks of a promise he made in a hospital bed 10 years ago after the crash. Never lose a fight. He kept that promise again last night. She does not explain how she knows these things. She only says his secret is safe today, but not forever. Na Hae-jin leaves the room before Seok-jun can form a reply. The door clicks shut. The ashes sit in the bag. The city skyline glows orange through the window. Si-woo enters 30 minutes later with a can of cold coffee. He sits in the visitor chair and puts his feet up on the bed frame. The young strategist says nothing about the time stop. He only mentions that the global audience is dissecting replay footage, but finding nothing unusual. Seok-jun stares at the ceiling, considers the invisible scar inside his left eye. 10 seconds. One use at the end. The plan kept him alive and kept the world blind. The door hinges creak as a nurse passes. Baek Si-woo opens the coffee and sets it on the tray table. The secret is safe for now. But a reporter's whisper already brushed too close. The next threat will not be a single reporter with a cheap microphone. It will be cleverer, will be hungrier. Seok-jun knows the question is not whether the truth will surface. The question is who will find it first.